It all started when Arthur Weasley stumbled upon a battered black device at a Muggle electronics market in London. He was there to pick up some spare parts for his flying car project, strictly for research, of course, when a sleek, dusty screen caught his eye. The label read Smart TV, and Arthur, utterly fascinated, bought it on the spot with a handful of Muggle money and a wide grin. Back at the Burrow, he spent days tinkering with the device, utterly captivated by its flashing images and endless shows. Fred and George, of course, caught wind of it and immediately recognized the potential for chaos. Within a week, they had not only learned how to use the device, but also how to copy the concept, sort of. "Imagine if Hogwarts had one of these," George whispered, eyes gleaming with mischief. "You mean the whole castle? With this much entertainment?" Fred grinned. They pitched the idea to Dumbledore with a mock presentation, complete with sparklers, illusions, and a catchy jingle. Netflix, for when Quidditch just isn't enough. To their surprise, Dumbledore laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that seemed to shake his half-moon spectacles. "My dear boys," he said, "what a truly absurd idea. And I adore absurd ideas." Within a week, the Weasleys, with some help from Hermione, who insisted on adding security enchantments, developed the world's first magical streaming platform, Netwitch. It ran off a modified Wi-Fi charm, a combination of Protego, Lumos, and something very illegal from Nocturne Alley. Powered by a tame lightning elemental chained inside an enchanted modem. McGonagall was furious at first. What in Merlin's name is a reality show? And why is Mr. Filch watching one about trolls doing home makeovers? But the deed was done. Every common room now had a floating crystal that projected glowing, moving images, selectable by voice command, no less. Students were allowed 1 hour per evening, strictly after homework and before curfew. Naturally, it took exactly 2 days before Ravenclaws hacked the system. Gryffindors made a secret tunnel to their own viewing room, and Slytherin started bootlegging episodes for galleons. It began innocently enough. A documentary on magical creatures. A cooking show starring house elves from 4 different countries. Even a limited series drama titled The Wand and the Crown, allegedly based on the rise and fall of Godric Gryffindor's great-great-great-nephew. But soon Hogwarts was obsessed. Ron skipped Quidditch practice because he had to binge-watch The Vampire Cup, a steamy teen romance between a vampire Hufflepuff and a werewolf Slytherin. Hermione was caught sneaking enchanted earbuds under her robe during History of Magic. Even Snape paused a lecture to sneer. "If one more dunderhead asks me if this potion turns people into reality stars, I will hex the Wi-Fi out of this dungeon." The real chaos began when students started submitting classwork inspired by Netwitch. Neville turned in a herbology essay that was basically a fan theory breakdown of Plant Wars, Revenge of the Mandragora. Luna began a podcast about conspiracy theories involving characters from Dark Marks and Dagger Hearts. And Draco Malfoy. Well, Draco saw the future. He wasn't interested in watching shows. He wanted to be in them. "Think about it," he whispered to Blaise Zabini one evening in the Slytherin common room. "Hogwarts is filled with drama, scandal, forbidden love, duels. We don't need to watch shows. We are a show. We just need to start filming it." He used a charmed mirror, enchanted by Pansy Parkinson, and began filming daily life at Hogwarts under the title, The Real Students of Hogwarts Castle. It blew up overnight. By breakfast the next day, everyone had seen the clip where Harry tripped over a moving stair and spilled pumpkin juice on Professor Sprout. By lunch, the school was buzzing over a slow-motion montage of Ginny hexing 2 boys at once. And by dinner, the professors had convened an emergency meeting. "This is a disaster," growled McGonagall. "Or a brilliant opportunity," mused Dumbledore, watching a loop of Hagrid trying to teach blast-ended scrits to dance. From that point on, Netwitch didn't just stream content. It became about Hogwarts. Students submitted their own shows, series, and spin-offs. Gryffindor girls started a mystery show called Prefect Problems. Hufflepuff produced an adorable cooking contest called Cauldron Cravings. Ravenclaws, naturally, released a science fiction drama called Beyond the Forbidden Forest, complete with magical CGI. Even Filch launched a low-budget horror series about detention called Dust and Despair. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. "Why is my Transfiguration lesson being rated 2.3 stars? McGonagall barked, slamming a crystal tablet onto Dumbledore's desk. Because the Slytherins are review bombing you, Flitwick replied without looking up from his own device. Dumbledore chuckled. Minerva, perhaps it's time you tried a costume change. Maybe a dragon onesie. She hexed his beard blue. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the Wi-Fi charm began acting strangely. The magical energy coursing through the castle was being altered. Spells misfired. Portraits began speaking in sitcom quotes. Peeves started appearing in perfect sync with laugh tracks. And the Marauders' map suddenly began displaying spoilers. Hermione, Ron, and Harry gathered in the library late one night. I think the castle's magic is merging with the stream, Hermione said, flipping through ancient tomes. It's not just broadcasting anymore. It's becoming interactive. You mean the shows could come to life? Ron asked, looking horrified. Or worse, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Someone could write themselves into them. That's when the floating crystal near the ceiling flickered. The screen turned dark. Then a message appeared in burning red text. Coming soon. A new player has entered the story. They stared at each other in silence. And somewhere, deep in the Forbidden Forest, a camera clicked on by itself. The glowing red message lingered in the air, pulsing with eerie rhythm like a heartbeat. The floating crystal in the library crackled with faint static before dissolving into smoke, leaving behind a trail of sparks that drifted slowly downward, vanishing before they reached the floor. Hermione leapt to her feet. That wasn't part of any regular stream. That was a direct magical override. Harry looked pale. You mean someone's controlling the platform? Like from inside? Or from outside? Hermione muttered, flipping rapidly through modern magical networks and you. We built Netwitch with boundaries, magical filters, Hogwarts-only encryption layers, a restricted range of access. None of this was supposed to go beyond the castle grounds. Ron gulped. Then how'd that message break through? Hermione didn't answer. She just stared down at a sketch of the Wi-Fi charm. Lightning elemental. Streaming conduit. Spell layers. Her quill quivered above the page. We need to talk to Dumbledore, Harry said, already heading toward the door. But before they could even reach the hallway, the lights flickered. Not the usual warm glow of floating torches, but actual artificial overhead lights. Harsh. Fluorescent. Muggle. Then the hallway changed. The paintings on the walls stopped moving. The stairs locked in place. Everything suddenly looked two-dimensional, like someone had overlaid a cheap TV set design over real magic. A deep, booming narrator's voice echoed from nowhere. Welcome to Hogwarts Reloaded. A reality drama mystery action fantasy comedy you can't look away from. They looked around in stunned silence. Then, cue theme music. A cheesy remix of the Hogwarts school song began blaring across the castle. It was upbeat, peppy. It had drums. Students poured into the hallways, looking around in confusion. Some of them had glowing outlines around their bodies, as though they were being highlighted by a camera. Each time someone spoke, subtitles appeared in the air beside them. Why am I glowing? Yelled Dean Thomas. Dean, fourth year, has no idea what's going on. Did someone just write my name next to my head? Shrieked Parvati Patil. Parvati, fourth year, probably not a main character. Then a sound like a buzzer filled the castle. A glowing leaderboard floated above the Great Hall, projecting the current viewership rankings. Students gasped as names flashed across the screen in bold lettering. 1. Draco Malfoy, the antihero heartthrob. 2. Hermione Granger, the brainy babe. 3. Luna Lovegood, the wild card. 4. Harry Potter, the chosen one again. 5. Ron Weasley, comic relief, but make it sad. Ron blinked at the glowing projection. Why am I fifth? Ron, best friend, feeling underrated. Who's doing this? McGonagall's voice rang out from the staff table. Turn this nonsense OFF. But her voice was drowned out as a brand new figure entered the Great Hall. A tall, hooded figure whose shadow bent unnaturally, even in torchlight. Their cloak shimmered with static like bad reception. Where their face should have been, there was only a swirling black void and a glowing red cursor that blinked slowly. Everyone froze. The crystal in the ceiling flared to life again. This time, it displayed a series trailer, complete with cuts, voiceover, and epic music. This season on Hogwarts Reloaded, clips flew past in a blur. Harry dueling someone who looked suspiciously like himself. Draco crying in the rain. Hermione slapping Ron. Luna speaking in riddles to a moving statue. Dobby wearing sunglasses and punching a Death Eater. Then, introducing the viewer. The figure raised their hand. The castle paused. Time froze. Except for Harry, Hermione, and Ron. They stumbled backward, breathing heavily, as the rest of the Great Hall stood still, students frozen mid-bite, mid-shout, mid-text bubble. The viewer stepped forward, and for the first time spoke. Their voice was layered with 1,000 different tones, distorted and changing. "You've entertained for long enough," they said. "But your ratings have plateaued. Hogwarts needs reinvention." "Who are you?" Harry demanded, wand out. "I'm the audience," the viewer replied. "The binge-watcher. The theory crafter. The one who skips to the good parts." Ron raised an eyebrow. "Wait, you're saying you're watching this? All of us? Right now?" "I was," said the viewer. "Until I got bored. Now I've decided to join the cast." With a flick of their hand, the castle shimmered. The house point system was replaced by follower count. Duels became live events. Even the Daily Prophet was absorbed into the system, now a clickbait headline generator popping up as push notifications in midair. Dumbledore appeared at the back of the hall, pushing his way through the frozen crowd. "This is an intrusion of the highest order. Hogwarts is not your stage." "Oh, headmaster," the viewer said, almost amused. "You've always been a showrunner. I'm just updating your format." Then they vanished, just blinked out of existence. Time unfroze with a jolt. Students staggered as if they'd missed a beat in reality. Everyone was whispering. "What happened? Did time stop?" "I just got a friend request from Professor Trelawney." Harry pulled Hermione and Ron aside, ducking into a side corridor. "We've got to stop this before it gets worse. Hogwarts isn't a TV show." Hermione nodded grimly. "The magic is unraveling. If we let this viewer keep bending reality, our lives won't be real anymore. They'll be scripted." Ron groaned. "So, we're in a magical reality show with a literal audience ghost editing our lives." "Essentially," Hermione said. "And if we don't do something, the next episode might be our last." Just then, their devices pinged with a new notification, projected in the air like a floating parchment. "New challenge unlocked. Escape the script. Status live. Prize freedom. Risk cancellation." The hallway lights dimmed. And then a clock began ticking. The ticking echoed through the stone corridors like a curse, an unnatural rhythm that didn't match any clock in Hogwarts. It pulsed through the floor, vibrating up through Harry's shoes into his bones. Every student device, tablets, crystal viewers, enchanted mirrors, lit up with the same message. Challenge. Escape the script. Time remaining. 59:59. Cameras active. Audience vote on. Harry, Hermione, and Ron stood frozen in the corridor just outside the Great Hall. Above their heads, shimmering glyphs flickered, visible only to them, tagging their current scene. Main characters. Plot branch, rebellion, genre, thriller/comedy. "This is madness," Ron whispered, his eyes darting around as the torches shifted into cool blue studio lights. "Actual madness." Hermione looked up. "We have an hour to figure out what this challenge even means and then beat it, or..." The rest didn't need to be said. Their surroundings had already begun to warp. Students walked past but didn't speak. Their mouths moved in silence, their bodies moving mechanically. Background actors. Extras. Glitching between frames. And worse, when Harry made eye contact with one girl, her face suddenly blurred, a rotating, loading circle hovering in front of it. "They're not real," he muttered. Hermione took a deep breath and tapped her wand against the wall. "Point me the script." Her wand spun, stopped, then jerked violently toward the library. Without hesitating, the trio took off down the corridor. With each step, the castle's normal ambience gave way to something stranger. The suits of armor turned to cardboard cutouts. The staircases no longer moved unless cued by music. And the paintings? Static, their inhabitants frozen mid-gesture with buffering written underneath. In the library, the atmosphere was eerily sterile, shelves rearranged into perfect symmetry. Students posed around tables like stock photos. Madame Pants stood at the center like a wax figure, holding a clipboard that shimmered with golden text. Hermione crept forward, cautiously lifting the clipboard from the unmoving librarian's grip. "What is it?" Harry asked. "It's the script," she whispered, her eyes scanning it. "Every scene. Dialogue. Choices. Outcomes. It's our lives, formatted like a Netwitch series." Ron peered over her shoulder. Episode 3, Escape the Script. Scene 4. Trio discovers the master page and questions their identity. "Blimey, we're living it right now." Hermione's hand tightened around the page. "We have to break the scene before it finishes. That's how we win this challenge. If we do what the script says, we lose." "Then let's improvise," Harry said quickly. "What's the next scene?" Hermione flipped the page. Scene 5. Harry declares a plan to sneak into the room of requirement, where they believe the viewer is hiding. They go in unprepared and are caught in a narrative trap. "Perfect," Harry said. "So we don't go there. We pick somewhere completely unpredictable," Hermione agreed. "Somewhere no one would expect." Ron raised his hand sheepishly. "The one place no one ever wants to go when things are serious?" They looked at him. "Divination Tower." A pause. Hermione grimaced. "That's brilliant." Moments later, they were racing through the castle again. The world glitched around them, staircases warping mid-run, fake commercial breaks, trying to block their path with glowing ads. "Don't miss tonight's duel between Draco and Neville. Who will cry first?" They pushed through them, shielding their eyes. By the time they reached the spiral staircase to the North Tower, the air was thin and buzzing. The top of the tower was bathed in lavender light, clouds of incense hanging in the air like dream fog. Professor Trelawney, or what remained of her, sat motionless at the center, a glassy-eyed projection of herself, endlessly looping through her usual dramatic monologues. But behind her, the room shimmered. "Look there," Hermione said, pointing to a small wooden door behind the beaded curtains. "That shouldn't be there." They rushed past the holographic Trelawney, opened the door and stepped inside, and immediately, the magic around them snapped. The sound vanished. The glitching stopped. The ticking halted. They found themselves in a silent, dimly lit room, lined with old-fashioned typewriters, all typing by themselves. Pages flew from the rollers, stacking into columns. A single glowing orb hovered in the middle. "Is this the writer's room?" Ron asked. Hermione moved to one of the pages and read aloud. "Scene rejected. Harry falls in love with a basilisk." "What?" Harry picked up another. "Scene drafted. Ron dies heroically, but comes back as a ghost sidekick." Test audience didn't like it. Ron grabbed a third. "Oi! This one says, Hermione's brain replaced by a magical AI because she was too smart to be relatable." "That's bloody rude." They moved to the orb. It pulsed with a faint hum, and as Harry reached out, it responded to his presence. Words scrolled across the surface. "Would you like to change the script?" "Do we?" Harry asked. Hermione hesitated. "We can't rewrite the past. But maybe we can write our way out." Harry touched the orb. A burst of light filled the room. Then black. They blinked. Suddenly they were back in the Great Hall. Everything was normal again. Students chattered. The crystals had returned to warm, soft lighting. The leaderboard? Gone. The ticking? Silent. Even the glowing labels above their heads had vanished. "Did it work?" Ron whispered. Hermione looked around, tense. "I think we escaped the script, but I'm not sure we escaped the story." Just then, the crystal flared again. A new message floated over the hall. "Congratulations, challenge complete. But remember, every show needs a twist." In the shadows of the Slytherin table, Draco Malfoy smirked as he opened a floating console behind his back. He had seen everything, and now he was editing. Draco Malfoy had always been obsessed with control. At Hogwarts, though, true control was rare. Professors dictated rules, bloodlines shaped status, and Harry Potter always seemed to steal the spotlight. But now, with Netwitch bending reality itself, Draco had found a backdoor into something no wizard had ever held before. Creative control. He leaned back in the shadows of the Slytherin common room, the enchanted floating console hovering before him. It shimmered with code and script fragments, pieces of the castle's new magical media infrastructure. The viewer may have introduced the system, but Draco had been watching, studying, learning. When everyone else panicked, he saw opportunity. And now, he had admin access. With a smirk, he tapped a command into the console. /launch show, Malfoy_means_magic. Genre, supernatural romance / high fantasy / revenge drama. Main character, Draco Malfoy. Antagonist, TBD. Filming live. The castle shimmered slightly. No one noticed, not yet. But the edit had begun. At breakfast the next morning, the food looked the same, golden plates, floating pumpkins, toast and bacon, but students were acting strange. Lavender Brown kept dramatically narrating her life in third person. Seamus wore an eye patch and claimed he was cursed by the prophecy of flame. And Pansy Parkinson had a violin that played by itself every time she entered a room. Harry, Hermione, and Ron noticed immediately. "Something's off," Hermione said, glancing around. "We broke the script yesterday. There shouldn't be one anymore." "Someone rebooted it," Harry muttered. "But this feels weirder." Then Ron opened his enchanted tablet and groaned. Now playing, Malfoy Means Magic. Episode 1, The Dark Prince Rises. Narrated by Lucius Malfoy, posthumously, via voice enchantment. "Malfoy started his own show?" Ron shouted. "And he's the star?" "And apparently a tragic antihero chosen by fate," Hermione added, reading a synopsis. "Who's also a misunderstood vampire. And has phoenix blood. And a destiny to unite all houses." "Of course he does," Harry muttered. Just then, a dramatic gust of wind blasted open the great hall doors. Students gasped as Draco strode in, his robes billowing unnaturally, his eyes glowing faintly silver. His voice echoed unnaturally as he declared, "Darkness may haunt these hallowed halls, but I, Draco Malfoy, shall write a new destiny." Draco Malfoy, chosen by Shadow and Fire ratings, spiking. Everyone stared in stunned silence. Then a laugh track played. "Is that part of it?" Ron whispered. "Clearly," Hermione said, jaw clenched. "He's not just part of the system anymore. He's directing it." As Draco made his way to the front of the hall, he snapped his fingers. Instantly, enchanted petals rained down around him. Blaise Zabini pulled out a scroll and began reading fan letters aloud in a dramatic voice. Pansy swooned. "Is this a breakfast or a Broadway show?" Ron hissed. But the changes weren't just theatrical. All across Hogwarts, scenes were being overwritten. The Gryffindor common room was now a moody, candlelit tower labeled the Den of Secrets. The Forbidden Forest had been rebranded the realm of beasts and betrayals. Even the bathrooms had glowing, romantic filters labeled soft lighting, angsty edition. By mid-afternoon, students were no longer acting like themselves. Hannah Abbott fainted at random intervals for plot tension. Dean Thomas wore a leather jacket and spoke only in riddles. And Luna? Luna was the only one unchanged. "Because I refused the casting," she explained, sipping tea with her eyes closed. "I told the camera fairies I only accept roles with creative freedom. They respect boundaries, you know." Hermione dragged the boys to the library again. "We need to find that console Draco's using. If he's writing the show, he's also controlling us." She opened the Marauders map, but it didn't show Hogwarts anymore. Instead, it displayed scene titles. The Triumvirate Plots and Shadows. Malfoy's Monologue of Fate. Upcoming kiss scene, TBD. "This is getting ridiculous," Ron muttered. "No," Harry said grimly. "This is getting dangerous." As they exited the library, a glowing envelope appeared midair, bearing a wax seal in the shape of the Malfoy family crest. Harry caught it, and it opened automatically. "Dear co-stars, you've been invited to appear in tonight's episode, The Confrontation. Costumes provided. Try not to embarrass yourselves. DM. Costumes?" Ron asked. Suddenly, their robes shimmered. Hermione was now wearing an absurdly tight velvet cloak with sparkly runes. Ron had chainmail. Harry, to his horror, was dressed like a rogue prince, complete with a glowing sword and eyeliner. They all looked at each other. "Nope," said Hermione. "Absolutely not," Ron agreed. But the floating crystal in the ceiling above them beeped ominously. Live audience engagement enabled. Votes open. Do you want to see the trio attend the confrontation? The numbers began to climb. Yes, 87%. The floor beneath them lit up in a spotlight. And they were gone. Instantly teleported to the astronomy tower. The wind howled dramatically. Cameras whirred into position from all angles. Music played. A narrator began speaking in an over-the-top tone. In the midnight hour, our heroes arrive, unsure of what lies ahead but bound by destiny, love, and betrayal. I swear I'm going to murder Malfoy, Hermione screamed at the sky. A door opened behind them. Draco stood in the moonlight, cape flapping, a rose in one hand and a wand in the other. Welcome to my show, he said, voice dripping with melodrama. I trust you've enjoyed the previews. Now let's begin the real story. Harry barely had time to reach for his wand before another camera swooped into view, hovering inches from his face. He stepped back instinctively, only to bump into Ron, who had just drawn his sword. Yes, actual sword, with exaggerated flair. Hermione gritted her teeth, swatting at the floating spotlights buzzing around her like enchanted fireflies. Draco stood on the edge of the astronomy tower, backlit by a magically summoned full moon, holding that ridiculous rose and staring at them as if he were about to burst into song. Welcome, he intoned, to your reawakening. Harry blinked. Our what? Draco turned dramatically, letting the wind catch his cape. Tonight, the world will see what I've always known. That this story was never about a boy with a scar, or a girl with too many books, or a ginger comic relief. No, it was about me. Is he monologuing? Ron whispered. Classic villain move, Hermione muttered. Draco raised his arms. And now, for the most critical plot twist, your betrayal. The wind intensified, and suddenly 3 figures stepped from the shadows behind Draco. The crowd of students watching through their devices gasped in unison as the stream showed the new arrivals. Blaise Zabini, Daphne Greengrass, and, shockingly, Cho Chang. Harry's jaw dropped. Cho! Sorry, Harry, she said softly, avoiding eye contact. It's not personal. It's just the drama. Daphne flipped her hair. Draco offered us full character arcs and second-season contracts. Blaise shrugged. And better costumes. Draco smirked. I call them the narrative enforcers. They make sure things stay on script. Like hell they do, Hermione snapped. She whipped out her wand and cast Finite Narrata, a spell she'd created just an hour earlier by combining Latin roots and sheer frustration. The script glow around their costumes shattered. The sword vanished from Ron's hand. The eyeliner left Harry's face in a puff of glittery smoke. Oh, thank Merlin, he muttered. Draco's eyes narrowed. You've learned to resist the script. Impressive. We're done being part of your show, Malfoy, Hermione growled. You don't get to write our lives. Draco gestured, and suddenly magical chains of glowing text launched from the air around them, trying to bind the trio back into character roles. Scene direction, Harry, regretful hero monologue. Hermione, teary emotional support. Ron, awkward comic timing. But Hermione, wand flashing, cast Disruptum Canonica, severing the glowing chains mid-air. Ron clapped. Nice one. Harry grinned. All right, if we're sabotaging this, we start now. From somewhere behind the camera fairies, Luna's voice echoed, dreamy but confident. Don't forget the audience can hear you. Make it funny. The floating crystal above the tower buzzed. Viewer poll. Should the trio sabotage the show? Yes, 93%. No, 7%, all from Slytherin IP addresses. Draco's smugness faltered as his approval rating visibly dropped. This is my narrative. You hijacked the system, Hermione said. But the original stream code is still in there. The viewer gave you control, but we can reprogram it, if we survive this scene. Cho drew her wand hesitantly. Should we attack them now or wait for the dramatic pause? I think we're already in it, Blaise replied, checking a floating script window. Ron stepped forward, wand raised. You want drama, Malfoy? Here's your plot twist. He fired a hex that ricocheted off a magically reinforced spotlight, hitting one of the hovering cameras. The feed glitched, flickered, and then all across Hogwarts, student screens turned pixelated. Hermione followed up with a targeted spell at the broadcast core above the astronomy tower. The now streaming banner blinked. A scroll appeared in midair. Warning, feed unstable. Improvisation detected. That's our cue, Harry said. He lunged forward and tackled Draco just as the tower itself began morphing around them. Stone reshaping into green screens, the sky replaced by swirling code. As they rolled across the ground, Draco's wand skittered away, landing near Hermione. End the feed, Draco roared, wrestling with Harry. No, Hermione said calmly. We're going to fix it. She cast a wide-range override spell, Reset Narrativa. The entire tower shook. The scene collapsed around them. Suddenly, they were somewhere else. Not Hogwarts. Not even a set. They stood in a void of floating screens. A control room at the center of Netwitch's magical infrastructure. Massive levers labeled canon integrity, viewer engagement, and surprise deaths per season loomed overhead. In the center floated the master console, where the true narrative engine ran. The screen displayed a message. Reality show mode active. Override access. Admin Malfoy. Hermione placed her wand against the screen and whispered, "Let's rewrite this." The console pulsed and asked, "New show title?" Harry smiled. "Hogwarts Unfiltered." Ron added, "No scripts. No edits. Just chaos." Hermione locked it in with a final spell. The void exploded with light. Back in Hogwarts, all the screens blinked out. The broadcast ended. And for the first time in weeks, the castle was silent. No laugh tracks. No glowing subtitles. No narrator. Just magic. True, unpredictable, beautiful magic. In the days that followed, the Netwitch crystal remained dormant, floating quietly above the Great Hall like a sleeping relic. Most students went back to their normal lives, though some still whispered about which episodes were canon and which had been fan edits. Draco sulked for a while, claiming creative sabotage. But even he had to admit, Hogwarts felt more real than it had in ages. Of course, none of them noticed the flicker of red deep within the crystal, or the tiny line of code that pulsed once, then vanished. The days following the Great Reboot were oddly quiet. No camera fairies buzzing through the halls, no laugh tracks echoing in the corridors, no enchanted subtitles floating beside people's heads. Hogwarts breathed a collective sigh of relief. For the first time in weeks, life felt unscripted again, back to essays, spells, and stolen pastries from the kitchen. But late one night, while most of the school slept, the crystal in the Great Hall flickered once more. It was subtle, a twitch like a glitch in an old mirror. Then a single-channel icon appeared in the air above the staff table, glowing faintly purple, as though ashamed to be seen. Channel 404, The Forgotten. The symbol was not like the other polished logos from before. It was scribbled, cracked, unfinished. A jagged spiral surrounded by shifting runes that no one had ever seen. No one noticed it at first, until Dennis Creevy, sneaking through the Great Hall for a midnight snack, accidentally whispered, "What's that?" while glancing up. The screen responded instantly. Now playing, The Forgotten Channel. Warning, viewer discretion advised. Content type, unstable/lost/never meant to be. Dennis blinked as a soft humming sound filled the air. Images flashed, fast, jumbled, and wrong. A twisted version of Hogwarts where everyone wore matching masks. A classroom filled with puppets, shaped like real students. A version of Snape smiling. And Harry with glowing green eyes and a snake's tongue. Dennis screamed. By the time Filch found him, he was curled in a corner whispering, "It saw me! It saw me!" The next morning, the message had vanished. No crystal screen, no logo. Just Dennis's tablet, still open and cracked down the middle, with the words etched across it in pulsing text. They wrote us out. When Harry, Hermione, and Ron were told what happened, they didn't laugh it off. Not anymore. They hurried to the library, where Luna was already waiting. "I figured you'd come," she said, feeding a nargle she claimed was hiding inside the index catalog. Hermione held out Dennis's tablet. "Have you seen anything like this?" Luna nodded slowly. "Only in dreams. But also once, in the back room of the Room of Requirement. There was a corridor full of discarded storyboards, episodes that were never made, characters that never got introduced." Ron frowned. "Wait, like deleted scenes? Or scenes that deleted themselves," Luna said seriously. "Not every narrative wants to be told." Hermione pulled out a copy of Netwitch, Architecture of Magical Media. She turned to the final chapter, one that had previously been blank, and now found new text shimmering faintly on the page. The Archive of Unwritten Magic. "It's changing," she whispered. "The code is evolving. Something was buried under all those shows. Something old." Harry's scar gave a faint twinge. The trio exchanged looks. "Then we go back in," Harry said. "Not through the show. Not through the viewer. Through the archives." Ron groaned. Why do I feel like I'm signing up for the creepiest library adventure of my life? Luna smiled. Because you are. That evening, they made their way to the room of requirement, where the walls were still lined with echoes of past programming, shelves of floating scripts, looping blooper reels, character additions from alternate timelines. They ignored all of it and focused on the farthest corner, where a narrow hallway shimmered behind a curtain of static. Hermione pushed through it and instantly felt the pressure of magic grow thick around them, like they were walking through someone else's memory. Or maybe someone else's idea. The hallway was lined with doors. Each bore a nameplate etched with trembling runes. The boy who died instead. Hermione, the Dark Witch. Neville Longbottom and the Sword Eternal. Ron the villain. Ginny, Queen of Shadows. Hermione's hands trembled. These are timelines. Stories that were imagined but abandoned. Harry touched the nearest door. It opened with a quiet click. Inside was a small, dark room. No windows. Only a screen on the wall, and a mirror beneath it. The screen came alive, playing a strange episode. A version of Hogwarts ruled by fear, where Dumbledore was never headmaster. A girl named Matilda Black had been chosen instead of Harry. No trio. No Voldemort. But something far worse. A sentient magical parasite spreading through enchanted books, rewriting students into hollow versions of themselves. The mirror reflected it all, and when Harry looked into it, he saw himself in that world. Alone. Powerless. He stepped back quickly. Someone's collecting these, Hermione said. Someone's pulling together every version that was forgotten. Ron pointed at the back of the room. Look, a mark etched into the stone, the same jagged spiral from Channel 404. Harry's voice was barely audible. We didn't make that. The viewer didn't either. This isn't our magic. Suddenly, the room buzzed. All the doors in the hallway creaked open simultaneously, light flooding out from each one. The air grew colder, and a new message appeared in burning red over the hallway arch. You canceled us. Now we'll rewrite you. The crystal in the Great Hall exploded into life at that exact moment, without warning. Screens across Hogwarts flickered to a single stream. A young witch in black robes, with eyes that shimmered like broken glass, speaking calmly into the camera. Hello, Hogwarts. My name is Edra. I am the Forgotten Ark. And I'm here to finish the story. The feed cut. For a brief moment after Edra's broadcast, Hogwarts stood utterly still. Then the castle began to change. It started with the tapestries. The Grand Lion of Gryffindor, normally frozen mid-roar, shuddered and turned its head. Not in animation, but transformation. Its features melted into a winged serpent, and then into something unrecognizable. The colors of the house banners began to blur and shift, flickering between crests that didn't belong to any of the four houses. On the staircases, the portraits began arguing, with themselves. A young Dumbledore shouted at an older version, both trapped in the same frame, their voices overlapping. In another, two versions of Sirius Black, one laughing, one crying, fought for control of a single canvas. In the Hufflepuff common room, a potted plant grew thorns and whispered riddles. A first-year student fainted when their reflection in the mirror claimed to be their better-written replacement. And in the sky above the castle, clouds spun in swirling patterns that spelled out a single message. All timelines matter. In the room of requirement, the light from the open doors intensified. Each forgotten room was now active, playing their impossible stories like dark memories. The walls trembled with overlapping magic. Ron stumbled backward as ghostly figures poured out from a room labeled Ron the Villain. Alternate versions of himself, wearing black robes, smirking and arrogant, stalking past him like they didn't even see him. Well, that's disturbing, Ron muttered. Do I really look like that when I'm evil? Yes, Hermione said. And it's horrifying. They regrouped near the archway, just as Luna appeared through the static curtain, carrying a scroll that shimmered with unstable ink. I found it in the library, she said. It was tucked behind a self-updating textbook. It's called The Chronicle of the Cancelled. It names Edra and others like her. Harry took the scroll. His eyes skimmed the names. Edra Ark, the storyless witch. Corvin the Infinite, the boy who couldn't end. Melia Black, the sister that never existed. Arctus Lestrange, the rewritten hero. They were characters, created by magic, meant for stories that never happened, Hermione said. But the magic didn't forget them. It remembered, and it built them their own archive. They've been waiting, Luna said, biding their time in the forgotten bandwidth. And now they've found the open door. Harry's hands clenched around the scroll. They're merging their worlds with ours. Just then, the castle trembled violently. Outside the window, the Quidditch pitch cracked and reshaped into a colossal black stone arena, ringed by flames. The Forbidden Forest split into two, one lush and green, the other dark and frozen under a blood moon. And towers began appearing across the grounds, twisted duplicates of Hogwarts spires, flickering in and out of existence like broken memories. Every student's device lit up at once. New streaming event, the timeline convergence. Now playing, Episode 1, The World That Shouldn't Be. From the main courtyard, a massive holographic figure rose. Edra towering and calm, her eyes glowing with threads of raw code. I did not choose to be forgotten, she said, her voice echoing across the grounds. But you chose to forget. Now, your story is ours to finish. In the Great Hall, chaos had broken out. McGonagall stood on a floating table, casting stabilization spells as fast as she could. Hold the structure. Keep the walls from splintering into other versions. Students huddled in corners while duplicate versions of themselves blinked in and out of sight, alternate lives overlapping. A Slytherin prefect screamed as his clone from a dystopian timeline accused him of stealing the good arc. Professor Flitwick tried to contain the confusion. We're dealing with a recursive narrative breach. Someone shut down the channel, but no one knew how. Until Harry stepped into the center of the hall, lifted his wand, and shouted, I need to speak to Edra. The crystal shimmered. A new message appeared. Connection request sent to EDRA ARC. Response accepted. Channel direct. The floating crystal transformed into a swirling window. Edra appeared, not as the towering figure from earlier, but as a young girl, seated calmly at a desk covered in abandoned pages. Her robes were ragged, patched together with old house colors. She looked tired. Hello, Harry, she said. Or should I say, the boy who lived a more marketable life. I'm not here to argue, Harry said. I'm here to understand. Edra smiled. You already do. You think you're the hero because your story was finished. We were created, then erased, discarded drafts with nowhere to go. But we've been watching. All of us. She reached out and snapped her fingers. And suddenly, Harry was pulled into the stream. He found himself standing in a version of the Gryffindor common room. But the furniture was unfamiliar, the colors faded. Edra stood at the window. This was my version, she said softly. I was meant to be here. I was meant to matter. Harry turned to her. You still can. But not like this. You're hurting people. I'm giving them depth, Edra whispered. You live in a curated world. I want all of it. Then help us fix it, he said. Help us tell your story the right way. She looked at him for a long time. Then we begin with a test. One of your own must enter a forgotten story and rewrite it from within. Back in the Great Hall, the crystal blinked once more. New challenge unlocked. Echo Walk. Task: enter a cancelled timeline. Objective: reconnect the threads. Volunteers: pending selection. Hermione stepped forward. I'll do it. Ron grabbed her arm. Hermione, no. She needs someone who understands how stories work, she said. And I've studied enough to know when something's broken, and how to fix it. The crystal pulsed. Volunteer accepted, Hermione Granger. As she vanished into the stream, Harry whispered, Be careful. Because if Hermione failed, the next timeline to overwrite their world might be permanent. Hermione landed with a thud. Not apparition. Not a portkey. This was something entirely different, like being unzipped from one narrative and sewn into another. The world around her was cold, colorless. The sky overhead was a shade of gray, so lifeless it felt like it hadn't been painted in properly. Even the grass beneath her feet was dull, like a faded memory trying to pass as real. She stood in a warped version of Hogwarts. The towers were crooked, stretching too far into the sky. The castle was surrounded by a moat of ink, not water, liquid shadow that rippled with whispers. There were no sounds of students, no owls, no wind. Only silence, and the feeling that she was being watched. A message appeared in glowing script before her. Timeline, archive_67B. Hermione the Forgotten. Story state: incomplete/abandoned. Narrative core: corrupted. Mission: repair character threads, restore narrative balance. She took a breath and stepped forward. The main gates of the castle opened without her touching them. The great hall was empty but twisted. Banners from unfamiliar houses hung limp. House Emberthorn, House Miraxis, House Glimval, and House Dreadmore. Their symbols glowed faintly in the dark, unacknowledged. Hermione turned in a slow circle, absorbing the silence. Then she heard it, scratching. Quills on parchment. She followed the sound to a forgotten corridor that didn't exist in her Hogwarts, one carved entirely from blackened stone and echoing memory. At the end of it sat a massive wooden desk, and behind it, Hermione gasped. It was her. Or rather, a version of herself, frail, eyes sunken, skin pale like she'd never seen sunlight. This Hermione wore an enchanted quill tucked behind one ear and a cloak covered in rejection stamps. She was furiously writing pages that instantly crumbled into ash. The forgotten Hermione didn't look up. She whispered, "Don't distract me. If I stop writing, I'll disappear." I'm you," Hermione said gently. "From the true timeline. I came to fix this." "You can't fix it," the forgotten snapped, eyes wide and terrified. "I was almost part of the story. I was supposed to get my arc. My solo. My ending. But they cut me halfway through draft 4. They took my plot, gave it to someone else, and rewrote me into nothing." Hermione took a slow step forward. "You were never nothing. You're me. You're smart and strong and—" "I'm a B-side," the forgotten spat. "Do you know what it's like to be overwritten? To feel yourself fading from the outline?" Hermione paused. She didn't know that feeling. Not exactly. But she could imagine it. "Then let me help," she said, kneeling. "Let's rebuild your arc. Let's finish your story together." The forgotten Hermione stared at her. "You'd give me that?" "I'd share it," Hermione said. "Every version of us deserves a voice." The room pulsed. A flash of red light filled the hall, and then the floor cracked open. A glowing thread shot from Hermione's chest, her narrative line, and drifted toward the forgotten. It hovered just before her heart. She hesitated, then took it, and with a surge of magic, the world began to color itself. Books filled the shelves. Warm fire lit the corridor. The castle reshaped into something whole. And the two Hermiones stood, hand in hand, as the system responded. Thread restored. Hermione Granger, Variant 67B. Narrative stability, plus 14%. Echo walk progress, one of 4 threads repaired. But it wasn't over. Because the floor shook violently, and a new presence emerged, one far less cooperative. Out of the shadows stepped a boy with red hair, jagged scars across his face, and a wand that pulsed like it was alive. His eyes were sharp and bitter. Hermione recognized him instantly. "Ron," she whispered. But this wasn't her Ron. This was villain Ron, the one from the Hall of Abandoned Timelines. He smirked. "I don't like what you're doing here, Granger. You're fixing things. And I was written to break them." He raised his wand. Before Hermione could respond, he cast a hex that shattered a nearby wall, sending shockwaves through the corridor. The forgotten Hermione screamed and collapsed, fading, flickering like a weak signal. "Stop!" Hermione shouted. "She's part of the solution. She's part of a mistake," Villain Ron said. "And mistakes need to stay buried." Hermione dove to protect her variant, casting a shield just in time to block another attack. "You don't have to follow this story," she shouted. "You can choose a different ending." Villain Ron's expression darkened. "I was the different ending. But they never let me finish. So now I'll finish you." He lunged. Hermione grabbed the Forgotten's hand, shouted Exodus Echo, and vanished in a beam of violet light. She landed in a quiet white void, the holding zone between timelines. The forgotten Hermione was stable, resting, eyes closed, her body glowing faintly. Hermione panted, heart racing. She could feel the weight of the other broken threads tugging at her. Timelines filled with chaos and twisted versions of her friends. If Villain Ron was here, who else might be? A message flashed in the air. Thread 1 restored. Remaining 3. Next echo. Neville Longbottom and the Sword Eternal. Status. Hostile environment detected. Launching in 10, 9, 8. Hermione wiped her brow and whispered, "All right." Round 2. The countdown reached 0. Hermione braced herself, feet planted, wand tight in her grip, as the void dissolved around her, pixel by pixel, replacing itself with scorched stone and blood-red skies. Magic here was heavy, like wet iron in her lungs. The temperature dropped, not to cold, but to something worse, emptiness. A warning hovered in the air. Echo Walk Entry, Timeline 42A. Title: Neville Longbottom and the Sword Eternal. Status: Narrative collapse imminent. Objective: Extract the sword, repair the thread. Hermione landed hard on her feet at the top of what used to be the astronomy tower. Only now it was crumbled, melted like wax. The battlements had been reforged into thrones of bone and vine. In the distance, twisted versions of Hogwarts's towers leaned against one another, overgrown and jagged like rusted fangs. At the center of the ruined courtyard, atop a cracked plinth of stone, stood Neville. Or what remained of him. He wore black armor infused with vines, glowing softly at the seams. His face was partially obscured by a living mask of bark and thorn. In his hand was the sword of Gryffindor, but longer, darker, pulsing red, corrupted by narrative overload. Its tip scraped the ground behind him, leaving a smoking trail in his wake. Hermione stepped forward carefully. Neville. His head turned slightly. "I don't go by that name anymore," he said, voice layered with something ancient and echoing. "I am the Green King, Lord of the Eternal Bloom." "Right," she muttered. "Of course you are." He finally turned to face her fully. His eyes glowed faintly gold. There was power there, real power, but also grief. This wasn't madness. This was sorrow hardened into purpose. "You came for the sword," he said, lifting it. "Like the others." "I came for you, Neville." He didn't blink. "Why?" "Because you matter," Hermione said. "Because this timeline may be broken, but you're still a part of the story." Neville slammed the sword into the ground. Magic rippled out from the strike, warping the stone into roots that cracked and pulsed like veins. "I wasn't part of the story," he said bitterly. "Not enough, anyway. I was the backup, the almost chosen. And when I finally got my moment, they rewrote it, tamed it, turned it into something small." Hermione stepped closer. "But here you won. You killed Voldemort. You led Hogwarts." "I conquered it," Neville corrected. "And then it withered. Because power without story is just decay." He looked up. "Do you know how many endings I've seen? How many what-ifs where I die or fade or simply don't appear at all?" Hermione hesitated. "This sword, it's not just enchanted, is it? It's made of narrative magic." Neville nodded. "Forged from a dozen timelines. It remembers every victory I never got to have." Hermione took a slow breath. "Then give it to me." He looked at her, startled. "Let me carry it," she said. "You weren't forgotten, Neville. Not by me. Not by anyone who read your story. But if you keep holding this sword, you'll destroy what little remains of the real Hogwarts. The timelines will collapse. The Green King will never grow again." A long pause. Then he stepped down from the plinth. "You want it?" he asked. "Then earn it." The ground beneath them cracked open into a dueling circle, natural stone, jagged and wild, surrounded by the vines of ruined stories. Neville raised the sword. It pulsed with living light. "I challenge you," he said. "Not to fight me, but to rewrite me." Hermione's heart hammered in her chest. "I accept." The duel began, not with spells, but with story. Words as weapons. Memories as shields. Neville raised his hand. Scene: Neville defeats the basilisk solo. A projection appeared behind him. An echo of a moment that never happened. Neville leaping, slicing the serpent midair. Hermione countered. Scene override. Hermione casts Petrificus Totalis and saves him. The projection wavered, then reformed, now showing both of them standing together, back to back. Neville advanced. Dialogue injection. Neville comforts Ginny post-chamber, instead of Harry. Hermione flicked her wand. Alternate cut. They both do, because friendship isn't exclusive. Scene by scene, timeline by timeline, they battled across possibilities, each clash rewriting the arena itself. The sword flared with every successful edit Neville made, and dimmed with every contradiction Hermione restored. But then he stopped. The sword trembled. He stared at her, exhausted. "I just wanted to be more," he whispered. "You already are," she said softly. "You were brave. You were loyal. You mattered. In every version. Even the ones that didn't get told. She stepped forward and held out her hand. Let it go. For a long moment, Neville didn't move. Then slowly he released the hilt. The sword eternal dissolved into golden thread. Hermione caught it in her hand. Immediately, the world began to tremble. The sky cracked. The false Hogwarts began to fall apart. A message floated above them. Thread 2 of 4 restored. Timeline 42A, resolved. Returning host entity to narrative archive. Neville smiled faintly as his armor crumbled away. Tell my real self thank you. Hermione nodded, tears in her eyes. She woke in the white void again. 2 glowing figures now floated beside her. The forgotten Hermione and the Green King. Both asleep, peaceful. Threads of their stories pulsed gently, woven into the main line once more. The next challenge shimmered into view. Next echo. Amelia Black, the sister who never existed. Narrative type. Hidden lineage/bloodline suppressed. Emotional hazard, extreme. Launching in 10, 9, 8. Hermione steadied herself. This one's personal, she whispered. Hermione stepped into the next echo, and instantly knew something was wrong. This Hogwarts wasn't scorched or broken like before. It was pristine. Too pristine. Every stone was clean. Every portrait smiled. Even the air smelled like lavender and lemon polish. It was artificial perfection, like a set dressed for a lie. The system flickered. Echo walk entry. Timeline 12E. Title. Amelia Black, the sister who never existed. Status. Historical repression detected. Objective. Restore suppressed bloodline thread without collapsing primary canon. She stood in the Slytherin common room, though it didn't feel like it. The atmosphere was light, not oppressive, and the green torches gave off a warm rather than eerie glow. There were no students. No sound. Just a single door at the far end of the room, one that shouldn't exist. Made of polished obsidian, etched with a silver bee. Hermione approached and touched the handle. The door opened inward into Grimmauld Place. Not the dusty, crumbling one she remembered, but a version completely restored, gleaming, glowing with magical perfection. The chandelier sparkled. The curtains swayed in an invisible breeze. And sitting on a velvet armchair near the fire was Amelia Black. She looked to be in her late teens, beautiful in the way Sirius had been, fierce, sharp-featured, with storm-gray eyes. Her hair fell in long curls like coiled smoke. She wore elegant Slytherin robes threaded with silver embroidery that shimmered faintly in the firelight. You finally made it, she said, sipping tea without looking up. Took you long enough. Hermione stepped in cautiously. You're Amelia. Correct. She gestured to the chair across from her. And you're Hermione Granger. Storybreaker. Timeline saboteur. Fixer of other people's endings. Hermione sat down slowly. Your timeline was hidden. Buried. Amelia's smile didn't reach her eyes. No. My existence was buried. I was real. Born to the noble and most ancient house of Black. Older sister to Sirius. Younger cousin to Bellatrix. And guess what? What? Hermione asked. I didn't matter, Amelia said coldly. Because I wasn't part of the prophecy. I didn't have the right gender. I didn't rebel loudly enough. I wasn't tragic enough to be remembered or evil enough to be feared. Hermione leaned forward. That's not true. Amelia's voice rose. I was brilliant. Top of my year. Invented counter-curses Dumbledore himself archived. And yet they cut me. Stripped me out of every branch. The Blacks whispered about me like a disease. Even the tapestry erased me. Hermione blinked. The Black family tapestry. Edited, Amelia said. It didn't burn me off. It never had me. She stood and walked to the wall, gesturing with her wand. The room rippled, and the tapestry appeared. But this time, Amelia's name glowed bright silver above Sirius's. I wasn't disowned, she whispered. I was unwritten. The fire roared behind her, and for a moment Hermione saw something flicker in Amelia's eyes, pain and fury. I don't want pity, Amelia said, turning sharply. I want return. I want my thread reattached. My place in magical history. My arc. My redemption. My war. My ending. You can have all that, Hermione said carefully. But not if you force your thread over someone else's. We can weave you in, not overwrite everything else. Amelia frowned. That's what Sirius said. Hermione blinked. You spoke to him? Amelia nodded, eyes darkening. In my timeline, he came to me after escaping Azkaban. I offered him shelter. Told him to let the world burn and build a better one. But he wouldn't. He still wanted to protect your story. Hermione stood. Then listened to him now. She raised her wand. A thread of light extended from it, one of the restored narrative strands, glowing gold and red. It pulsed with magic. Amelia's gaze locked onto it. If I take this thread, she said softly, what happens to me? You become real, Hermione said. Not perfect. Not rewritten. Real. With flaws. With truth. Amelia reached out. Then stopped. I was supposed to be the one who taught Harry clemency, she said. Supposed to be the spy who turned on the Lestranges. Supposed to die buying him time. I had so many roles. I know, Hermione whispered. And I wish I'd known your name before today. But now, I do. Amelia took a deep breath. Then grasped the thread. Immediately, the room pulsed. The tapestry burned away, revealing one that now included her, etched with fire, not fabric. Her name sat proudly beside Sirius's, glowing gently. A message flashed in the air. Thread 3 of 4 restored. Timeline 12E, reintegrated. Character archive, Amelia Black, status, reinstated non-canon branch. Warning, rogue entity approaching. Suddenly, the flames blew out. The walls cracked, and a new voice echoed from the shadows. 3 down, but you won't make it to 4. Hermione spun. Standing in the doorway was a boy, tall, pale, with a lightning bolt scar that glowed black. His eyes were green, yes, but hollow. Cold. He looked like Harry. But he wasn't. You're not him, Hermione said, heart pounding. No, the boy said with a sharp grin. I'm Corvin, the boy who couldn't end. Your final thread. The moment Corvin stepped into the room, the entire world shivered. Amelia backed away instinctively, her wand rising, but Hermione raised a hand. Don't. He's not like the others. He's not trying to rewrite himself into the story. Corvin grinned. That's right. I'm not fixing anything. I'm making sure it never finishes. The air around him warped, like time couldn't decide how fast to move. In one moment he looked like first-year Harry, small, fragile, bright-eyed. In the next, he towered like a man aged beyond comprehension, with battle-worn robes and lines etched across his face like cracks in stone. The black lightning bolt on his forehead pulsed, a corrupted echo of the mark Hermione had come to recognize for what it truly was, a narrative tether. Why are you here? She asked carefully. To survive, Corvin said. I'm the backup file, the safety net, the boy who lives again and again and again. Every time the world ends, I come back. Different writer, different war, same scar. Hermione realized what he was saying. You're a failsafe. Corvin nodded. Created by magic itself. When your story threatens to finish, when the world wants a conclusion, I reset it. New villain. New twist. New chosen one. Amelia whispered, You're a loop. Exactly, he said, eyes glowing. They tried to end the story so many times. The Deathly Hallows. The Cursed Child. The reboot draft. The streaming series. But I always come back. Because the world doesn't want to let go of the boy who lived. Hermione stepped between him and Amelia. But the story has to end, she said. That's what gives it meaning. Corvin laughed. You think people want meaning? No. They want more. More battles. More trauma. More prophecy. Forever. His face flickered between dozens of versions. Harry with silver hair, Harry with a mechanical arm, Harry in Slytherin robes, Harry wearing Voldemort's cloak. Each one a discarded draft. Each one screaming to exist. You're the 4th thread, Hermione said softly. The last echo. The most dangerous. I'm not just an echo, Corvin snarled. I'm the heartbeat of this world. And I won't be undone by some clever girl who wants closure. He raised his wand. And it wasn't a wand anymore. It was Quillwrath, the staff of infinite drafts. A cursed artifact made from the spine of the first magical author, pulsing with unread chapters. You can't fight me, he whispered. You can only reboot me. Hermione took a step forward. I don't want to fight you, Corvin. He tilted his head. I want to free you. They stood in silence. Even Amelia seemed frozen. You've been looped so many times, Hermione said, voice trembling. rewritten, stretched, resurrected. You don't even know who you are anymore. I'm the boy who can't die, he whispered. No, she said. You're the boy who was never allowed to rest. For a flicker of a moment, his expression faltered. Hermione took another step. We don't need infinite versions. We need truth. You're not a failsafe. You're a prisoner. And I'm here to set you free. She held out her hand. Corvin's wand shook. You're lying. I'm offering. The air pulsed. Reality around them began to crack, timeline tension spiking as the final thread approached resolution. From beyond the shattered windows, distorted versions of Hogwarts flickered. Futuristic Hogwarts with skyships, dystopian Hogwarts under curfew, reversed Hogwarts where Death Eaters taught classes. The story was unraveling. Make a choice, Hermione whispered. You can continue the cycle or complete the story. Corvin looked at his wand. It glowed faintly blue now. He looked at Hermione, then at himself. And he dropped it. The world collapsed. Not violently. Peacefully. Like a page turning. Hermione opened her eyes in the white void. Corvin lay beside her, asleep, no longer flickering. Just still. His scar was gone. A soft smile rested on his face, as if he'd dreamed a final dream and liked how it ended. Above them, for threads glowed. Forgotten Hermione. The Green King. Amelia Black. Corvin, the boy who couldn't end. All gently weaving into the greater narrative loom. A message scrolled slowly above. Final thread restored. Narrative balance achieved. Echo walk completed. System reboot initiating. Back in Hogwarts, the storm above the castle vanished. Screens went dark. The crystal in the Great Hall flickered once, then shattered like glass. Every student felt it at once. The stories had ended. The chaos had passed. And in its place, silence. Real silence. And then after a beat, life. Laughter. Quills scratching. Books being opened. Conversations with no subtitles. A story with no camera. Hermione appeared in the Great Hall moments later. Harry and Ron ran to her immediately. You did it, Harry breathed. Are you okay? Ron asked. She nodded slowly. I saw them all. They were all real in their own way. They just wanted to be heard. Luna stepped forward, holding a scroll. The archive closed. The doors sealed. Hogwarts is safe. Hermione exhaled. And somewhere deep beneath the castle, hidden in the oldest stones, a final phrase echoed softly. Words not in spell form, but in story. The end is not the enemy of magic. It is its purpose. The calm that returned to Hogwarts was unlike anything the school had known in centuries. For the first time since the viewer had flickered to life, there were no digital overlays, no floating episodes mid-class, no magical soundtracks trailing after conversations. Students returned to their dormitories without watching themselves walk through third-person cameras. The tapestries no longer morphed into trailers. Even Peeves, for once, was eerily quiet, as if he too understood that something bigger than mischief had passed through the halls. Rebuilding began. McGonagall declared a week of rest, calling it narrative recovery leave. Professors gathered to unweave corrupted lessons and restore their original curriculums. Filch, with a grunt of reluctant admiration, swept the last of the glitching pixels from the Great Hall floor. And Hermione slept for 2 full days. When she finally woke, her first stop wasn't the library, or even the common room. It was the astronomy tower. She stood at the edge, breathing in the cool morning air, watching the sky for signs of distortion. But the clouds looked normal now. Free. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a tiny folded parchment, a personal memento left behind by the archive. Inside were 4 names, handwritten in elegant, fading ink. Hermione the Forgotten, Neville the Green King, Amelia Black, Corvin Potter, and below them, in smaller letters, all stories deserve to rest. She tucked the parchment into her robes and turned to leave. But far beneath the castle, something stirred. Post-credit scene. Location: the sublevel beneath the Room of Requirement. Deep below the place where forgotten storyboards once burned, where the echoes of discarded timelines had whispered through the walls, a single door remained unopened. It didn't glow. It didn't call. It simply waited. No one had ever noticed it. Not even Luna. It was made of quiet wood, no carvings, no keyhole, no name. Until now. A single rune etched itself across its surface in smoky ink, curling like a tendril of thought. A whisper echoed from the darkness behind it. "You forgot me." A second rune joined it. A name written backwards. Seraphine. Inside the room, a pale figure sat on the floor, long fingers resting on an old, broken remote. She was neither child nor elder. Her skin flickered like old film stock, and her eyes held every scene never written, every line never delivered. She stared at the walls, blank as bone, and smiled. "They ended the show," she said softly. "But I was never in the show, was I?" She tapped the remote once. It sparked to life. "Let's try a new genre." It started with a page. A single piece of parchment fluttering down from the sky, blank on both sides, falling through the air like a feather forgotten by magic. It landed on Professor Vector's desk during an arithmancy lecture. When she touched it, her eyes glazed over for 3 full seconds. Then she blinked and forgot the class she was teaching. The students looked around in confusion as she whispered, "I was never meant to teach numbers," and walked out. Then came the weather. One morning, snow fell, but each flake was in the shape of a question mark. Madame Pomfrey caught one on her glove and stared at it as it melted into a sentence. "Why are you still here?" The next day, Hogsmeade vanished. Not exploded or attacked. Just edited out. Students who had gone for the weekend came back dazed, muttering about shops they couldn't find, streets that twisted into themselves, butterbeer that tasted like ink. And the sky. The stars began spelling things. Sentences like, "This story was never yours. The protagonist has left the building." Begin scene genreless. In the headmistress's office, McGonagall paced. She hadn't slept in days. "This isn't another echo," she muttered to herself. "This isn't a fragment. This is something new." She looked at the crystal, the one that had once broadcast Hogwarts like a magical Netflix feed. It was dull now, dead, but not empty, because someone had left something inside. A name. Seraphine. Hermione burst into the office, flanked by Harry, Ron, and Luna. "She's not from any archive," Hermione said. "She's not a character anyone ever wrote. I've checked every fragment, every erased draft, even the shadow cannons. She's a construct made from pure omission." "She's what's left when imagination forgets to imagine," Luna added dreamily. McGonagall frowned. "How do you fight something that was never real to begin with?" "You don't," Hermione said. "You have to write her in. You have to acknowledge her." But Ron shook his head. "That's what she wants. To be made real. And the moment she is, she takes control." Below them, in the sublevel, Seraphine rose from her quiet chamber. She was no longer static. Her form shifted with every step, sometimes girl, sometimes shadow, sometimes concept. Her voice, when she spoke, was the voice of 1,000 unwritten characters. Some tragic, some absurd, some barely half-formed. She walked the halls without being seen. Books opened in fear. Paintings turned their faces away. Even the ghosts whispered, "She wasn't supposed to be here." In the defense classroom, Professor Chong blinked as all her lesson plans turned into blank scripts titled, Episode 1, Unformatted. Seraphine entered the room and smiled. "I like this one," she said, sitting cross-legged on the teacher's desk. "Let's start over." Hermione and the others returned to the room of requirement. Except it didn't open. Instead, a new message hovered where the door should be. "Requirements are over. This room now belongs to the unscribed." Harry frowned. "She's taken it. She's rewriting the format of the castle," Hermione breathed. "Not just stories anymore. Rules. Logic. Genre. Everything." "What does that mean?" Ron asked. "I think," Hermione trailed off, "it means Hogwarts isn't a school right now." They turned and saw it. The castle was changing. Not breaking. Genre shifting. By evening, the Great Hall was gone, replaced by a crime scene. Red magical tape lined the entrance. There were magical detectives walking around in long cloaks. Everything was black and white except for Hermione and her friends, who still looked full color. A magical spotlight flicked on, blinding them. A booming voice said, "Detectives Granger, Potter, and Associates." Late to the scene again. A jazz saxophone played in the background. "This is a noir mystery," Harry whispered in horror. "She's turned Hogwarts into a crime drama," Hermione said. I didn't pack for a mystery arc, Ron muttered. A translucent figure stepped out of the shadows near the high table. Long coat, glitched face, empty eyes. Seraphine. I like noir, she said. Lots of shadows. Fewer expectations. Fewer rules. The kind of genre where forgotten people get noticed. You're destroying everything, Hermione said. I'm freeing it, Seraphine whispered. From canon. From structure. From the chains of genre. What if Hogwarts was a heist movie tomorrow? A sitcom on Wednesday? A cosmic horror on Friday? Why be one thing, when it can be all things? You'll tear it apart, Harry growled. Magic needs form. No, Seraphine said. Magic needs permission. I'm just taking mine. And with a snap of her fingers, the world went black. When Hermione opened her eyes, she was standing on a brightly lit stage. An applause sign blinked overhead. The audience was invisible but loud, clapping, laughing, gasping as though on cue. She looked down at herself. Her robes were gone, replaced by a suspiciously casual outfit. Jeans, trainers, and a hoodie with the words Granger Danger embroidered across the chest. Oh no, she whispered. A laugh track played behind her. A door to her left slammed open. Harry stumbled in, wearing a ridiculous sweater that said scarred but sassy, and holding a coffee mug labeled Chosen One Fuel. Hey, Hermione, he said in an exaggerated American accent. You'll never believe what happened at Wand Yoga today. The audience erupted in laughter. Hermione stared at him. Harry, this is a sitcom. He blinked. Oh, Merlin. The door flew open again. Ron ran in next, sliding across the floor in mismatched socks and screaming. I lost Crookshanks in the fridge. Cue applause and canned screaming. The walls wobbled. Props fell from the ceiling. A floating script appeared in midair. Genre, sitcom. Duration, 59 minutes. Objective. Locate the scene change anchor before the genre resets. Warning. Failing to adapt will result in narrative dissonance, loss of self. Hermione waved the script away. We have an hour before the genre shifts. We need to find the anchor, something that doesn't belong here. Right, Harry said, ducking as a levitating turkey flew across the room. And we're doing this every hour until we get to Seraphine. Exactly, she muttered. This is the Genre Gauntlet. She's made Hogwarts reset into a new format every 60 minutes. If we lose track of who we are, if we start becoming these versions, she hesitated, we'll forget the real story. The studio lights dimmed briefly, time ticked forward. A glowing clock hovered in the air. Time remaining, 47:32. Ron was busy rummaging through fake cereal boxes labeled plot loops. He held one up. This one's empty. No, it's not, Hermione said suddenly, eyes narrowing. Turn it upside down. He did. A single coin fell out, bright gold, but not a galleon. It had a genre symbol on one side, and a glitch on the other. Hermione grabbed it. This is it. This is the scene change anchor. Just as she said it, the studio began to shimmer, like it knew the episode was wrapping early. The audience gasped. The walls cracked. Reality blurred. And a final message appeared. Anchor detected. Transitioning. Next genre loading. Everything collapsed. Hermione fell through black and white static, spinning breathless, the coin tight in her grip. Then, she landed on cobblestones. Rain pelted down in sheets. Neon signs flickered overhead. They were in cyberpunk Hogwarts. Slytherin students in trench coats rode flying brooms rigged with electric thrusters. Prefects held glowing sigils that scanned faces. A metal snake wound its way around the astronomy tower, now covered in antennas and blinking towers. Ron groaned. Why does this Hogwarts have laser ghosts? A new message hovered. Genre, cyberpunk dystopia. Duration, 60:00. Objective, hack the genre core to restore identity access. Hermione's mind raced. Okay, new genre, new rules. This one's about systems, resistance, hacking the status quo. We need to find the genre core, probably located in the dungeons or the central network hub. Why would Seraphine do this? Harry asked, already ducking under a flying mechanical owl. Why all these shifts? She's testing us, Hermione said. She knows we're stable, tied to structure. If she fractures us, she weakens our story thread. From behind them, a distorted voice rang out through the rain. You're doing well. They turned. Seraphine stood on a hovering platform, dressed in black leather robes and a hood of static. Her face was blurred, her presence wrapped in genre-defying power. Even the rain avoided her. "You adapt. You survive," she said. "But eventually, you'll stop remembering who you are." Hermione stepped forward. "You're afraid." Seraphine's head tilted. "You're afraid if we get to the core of this, beneath the genres, beneath the masks, you'll be just like the rest. A story with an end." Seraphine's eyes flashed. "No," she said. "I'm not a story. I'm the void between stories. I'm what comes after endings." And with that, she vanished into static. The rain intensified. The trio ran. Every hallway now looked like a maze of digital wire and stone. Floating riddles blocked doorways. Dueling students sent code spells at each other, rewriting uniforms mid-fight. In the dungeon, they finally found it. A pulsing console embedded in the wall. On it, a glowing prompt. "Enter genre root password to unlock core." Hermione pressed her hand to the console. "I think I know it." She typed. "Ending." The console blinked. Unlocked. Behind them, the dungeon wall opened, revealing a spiral staircase of pure narrative thread, twisting downward into darkness. Ron stared. "That's either the way out, or the beginning of the weirdest genre yet." Hermione took a breath. "We follow it. All the way." Harry nodded. "Before Hogwarts forgets what it is." And from far above, Seraphine watched them descend, her smile fading. Because deep below the shifting genres, hidden at the bottom of all stories, was something even she didn't understand. A story that had never been written, only felt. The spiral staircase shimmered as Hermione, Harry, and Ron descended. Each step beneath their feet wove itself from words, literal sentences, glowing silver and gold. The banisters whispered dialogue from centuries past. Footnotes floated midair like fireflies. A single line ran down the center of the stairwell wall. This place was never meant to be seen. They didn't stop. The further down they went, the colder it became, not from lack of warmth, but from the sheer age of the place. Hogwarts was old, yes, but this was pre-Hogwarts. This was story before structure, magic before memory. They reached a vast chamber. Circular. Infinite. Lit not by torches, but by a massive glowing loom at the center, its threads swirling in midair, spinning through invisible needles, shaping and reshaping the very concept of the school. The air was thick with possibility, and in the middle of it all pulsed the thread heart of Hogwarts. It wasn't a heart, exactly. It was a living cluster of magical roots and shimmering parchment veins, like a nervous system built from dreams and spells. With every pulse, images flickered across the chamber, students laughing. First years discovering the boats. McGonagall's first duel. Dumbledore placing the sorting hat on a terrified Tom Riddle. "This is it," Hermione breathed. "This is where Hogwarts remembers itself." Harry took a cautious step closer. The core of the entire school. Its story. Its meaning. Its soul. Then the light dimmed. The loom slowed. Seraphine stepped from the shadows. But she looked different now. No longer genre-shifting or glitching, she had stabilized. Her form was clear, her eyes endless black. She wore no robes, no costume. Just a white dress made from blank pages, fluttering slightly as if blown by stories that had never been told. "I found it first," she said quietly. "I touched the thread heart before you even knew it existed." Ron stepped forward, wand raised. "And what? You're going to take over Hogwarts? Make it a story amusement park forever?" Seraphine didn't move. "No. I'm going to free it. From rules. From arcs. From endings. I'm going to let it become whatever it wants. No limits, no genre. Pure narrative entropy." Hermione shook her head. "That would kill it. It would liberate it," Seraphine snapped. "Why do you insist that stories have to be shaped? What if someone wants chaos? What if the most honest form of magic is one that never resolves?" "Because without form," Hermione said, stepping between her and the thread heart, "you lose identity. Meaning. You can't feel joy in chaos because there's no contrast. No structure to hold it. Hogwarts isn't just a story, it's millions of them. But they still need a spine." Seraphine's voice dropped. "And what if I am the spine? What if the missing piece was me?" A tense silence followed. Then Hermione reached slowly into her robes and pulled out the 4 glowing threads. Hermione the Forgotten, Neville the Green King, Melia Black, and Corvin. They weren't part of canon either, she said softly. But we made space for them. Not by erasing the story, but by expanding it. She held the threads up to the loom. The thread heart pulsed, brighter than before. And then Seraphine screamed. No, don't you dare. Hermione stepped forward. You weren't imagined, she said. But you were felt. That makes you part of the story now. Not its enemy. Its evolution. Seraphine's form began to flicker. Tears formed in her black eyes. If I let you do this, I'll stop changing. I'll end. Hermione reached out and gently took Seraphine's hand. You'll begin. With trembling fingers, Seraphine placed her palm on the thread heart. The chamber ignited in gold and white and colorless flame. Rushing, swirling upward like a story uncoiling itself for the very first time. All 5 threads wove themselves into the loom. The narrative settled. The loom became still. And for the first time in Hogwarts' long, magical life, the thread heart sighed. When the trio awoke, they were back in the Gryffindor common room. No flickering camera. No laugh track. No genre filter. Just the sound of a warm fire and rain pattering against the windows. Harry looked down at his hands. We're back, Ron muttered. And I don't smell like future Grease anymore. Hermione smiled faintly. It's over. In the headmistress's office, McGonagall opened a dusty old tome that had never existed before that day. Its cover read, Hogwarts, The Untold Chapters. Inside were new names. New arcs. Seraphine's name appeared between chapter 49 and 50. No longer forgotten. No longer unimagined. Just part of the whole. And deep beneath the castle, the loom of Hogwarts pulsed quietly, no longer spinning wildly but breathing. Balanced. Awaiting the next great story. The first morning of Hogwarts normalcy began with the smell of fresh pumpkin scones and the announcement of a school-wide celebration. Return to Reality Festival, McGonagall had called it with a rare and tired smile. After what we've all endured, I dare say a little chaos-free celebration is in order. Posters went up across the castle within hours, magically charming themselves to dance with glitter and cheerful jingles. Students gathered in the Great Hall to plan performances, exhibitions, and story retellings of what they thought happened during the genre collapse. The day promised butterbeer fountains, illusion fireworks, and even a magically conjured stage in the courtyard for dramatic reenactments. But something lingered. In the Gryffindor common room, Hermione sipped her tea slowly, watching the fireplace. It burned perfectly. No shifting color filters, no cinematic soundtrack. Ron threw a pillow at her. You've been quiet all morning. I'm just thinking, she said. Harry leaned over. Is it about Seraphine? No, she said, though it was a partial lie. It's about genre drift. Ron blinked. Genre drift. Residual formatting, Hermione explained. When narrative magic leaves an imprint, it can warp reality even after the original enchantment ends. Some parts of Hogwarts might still be infected. Ron narrowed his eyes. Define infected. They got their answer an hour later. At the Ravenclaw exhibition, students performed a hauntingly beautiful poem, only for their podium to melt halfway through into noir mist. One of them began narrating in a deep detective drawl mid-stanza. Her words fell like broken glass across the cold tile floor of my heart. Even he looked surprised. Next, a group of Hufflepuffs attempted a baking stand. But the moment they rolled out dough, an ominous title card floated above their heads. Hogwarts, the Great British Spell-Off. The sky turned cloudy. A phantom judge appeared, robes, monocle, and floating clipboard, and scolded a student for not tempering their chocolate potion correctly. Luna Lovegood leaned against a butterbeer barrel nearby and said dreamily, It's like genre echoes, they're still bouncing off the stone. Hermione, Harry, and Ron met with McGonagall behind the stage curtain later that day. It's harmless, the headmistress said calmly, and in some cases charming. The staircases occasionally recite Shakespeare. The suits of armor have taken to introducing themselves in musical numbers. Hermione raised an eyebrow. So Hogwarts is genre hiccuping. Precisely, McGonagall said. But I believe it's temporary. The castle endured centuries of fixed form. A bit of lingering improvisation is to be expected. Harry grinned. I'd take Shakespearean stares over sitcom Snape any day. Agreed, Hermione said quickly. That evening, the festival began in full. Magical lanterns floated across the courtyard, music played, mostly in the correct key, and the first-year class put on a surprise shadow puppet show titled, "The Day the Story Went Sideways." People laughed. Some cried. And slowly, the trauma of fractured identities faded into nostalgia. Hermione found herself smiling as the Weird Sisters performed a folk remix of Hedwig's theme, with lyrics somehow. Ron danced. Badly. Harry didn't dance at all. Luna levitated 4 chairs into a spinning carousel and read fortune cookies from an upside-down hat. Seraphine, though absent from the event, wasn't forgotten. Someone had left a new seat in the courtyard circle. A small plaque rested on the back. For the unwritten, now remembered. Just past midnight, as the last of the students shuffled back to their dormitories, Hermione walked alone through the corridor near the library. She paused outside the room of requirement. It looked normal again. Plain wall. No door. Until she thought, I need to remember. The door appeared. She stepped inside. Instead of chaos, she found a quiet reading room lit by floating candles. On a central table sat a new book. Leather-bound. Untitled. She opened it. Blank. Then, as if from the air, words appeared on the first page. Chapter 1. The School That Dreamed Beyond Itself. Beneath it, to be written. Hermione smiled, touched the page gently, and whispered, "Not today." She closed the book and walked out, knowing Hogwarts was healing, not just structurally, but narratively. Yet far away, outside the castle grounds, something stirred in the forbidden forest. A clearing shimmered where no clearing should be. At its center sat a mirror, but not the mirror of Eriste. This one had no reflection. Only shadows. A faint voice echoed from within it. There are still stories unwritten, forgotten by both sides. A single spark of genre magic lit the surface. Then it blinked out. The next morning began normally, by post-Genre Gauntlet standards at least. Breakfast was served without the food narrating its nutritional values. The great hall ceiling didn't glitch into a sci-fi skyline. Not a single cup of pumpkin juice burst into musical confetti. All signs pointed to stability, which is why everyone noticed the new girl instantly. She sat at the Ravenclaw table, alone, reading a book that didn't exist in the library catalog. She had silvery hair that shimmered oddly, too clean, like it had just been digitally rendered. Her eyes were different colors every time someone looked at her. One moment violet, the next pale green, sometimes brown. And her robes didn't have a house crest. Just a small, stitched emblem of a quill and a key. Hermione spotted her first and froze mid-step. "That seat wasn't there before," she whispered to Harry. "And neither was she," he replied. Ron blinked. "You don't think she's?" "I think we're looking at a narrative anomaly," Hermione muttered. She approached cautiously. "Hi, I'm Hermione Granger." The girl looked up, blinked slowly, and said, "Nice to meet you. I think I'm Calla." "Calla," Hermione repeated. "I think," she said again, a wrinkle of confusion forming. "Sorry. It might be Clara. Or Kayla. It changes sometimes." Harry frowned. "Your name changes?" Calla Clara Kayla gave a small nod. "Only when I wake up." Hermione pulled out a pocket quill and began scribbling notes furiously. "That's not how memory works. Not naturally." Calla tilted her head. "I've had 27 names in the last 17 mornings." "And where are you from?" Hermione asked gently. A pause. "Every time I try to remember, I see a genre." Hermione's stomach dropped. Calla continued. "This morning, I was from a spy thriller. Yesterday, a fairy tale. Before that, I think it was a cooking competition." The table around her shimmered briefly, just for a second. The fruit bowls rearranged into a dramatic 3-act structure. Hermione turned sharply. "We need to get her to McGonagall." Now, in the headmistress's office, Calla sat calmly in the same chair once occupied by countless magical mischief-makers. But unlike them, she seemed unsure if she belonged. McGonagall, for her part, remained stone-faced as she examined Calla's magical enrollment signature, which pulsed like static on the parchment. "No wand registry. No all history. No vault at Gringotts," she said aloud. "And yet, you're undeniably a student. Your magical field resonates with the wards." Hermione added, "It's like she was inserted perfectly into the system, but without a source file. Calla looked down. I dream about a room made of paper, walls that rewrite themselves, and a mirror that whispers. That made Hermione freeze. A mirror? Calla nodded. It says it's the reflection that forgets. It tells me stories that haven't happened. It says I was born from possibility. McGonagall stood slowly. Miss Granger, Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley, keep an eye on her. But discreetly. If she is what I suspect, we may be dealing with a genre residue bloom. Ron whispered. That sounds fake and terrifying. Hermione whispered back. It's real. And worse. That night, Calla stayed in a conjured bed in the empty West Wing tower. No other students were assigned there, an experimental decision. Wards surrounded her room in case she changed again. But Hermione couldn't sleep. She snuck out after curfew and made her way up to the astronomy tower, where the stars still remembered their lines. Luna was already there, sitting on a windowsill. I know why you're here, she said. You've seen Calla? Hermione asked. Not seen, Luna said softly. Heard. She hums different each day. Songs from stories that don't exist. Yesterday it was a pirate ballad. Today it was a retrofuturist lullaby. Luna, Hermione said slowly, do you think she's not from here? She's not from anywhere, Luna replied, her voice calm. She's from between. A child born of every idea Hogwarts couldn't hold. But now that Seraphine is part of the loom. She found a doorway, Hermione finished. Luna nodded. A door no one meant to leave open. Down in her conjured bed, Calla opened her eyes at exactly 3 a.m. She sat up. The moonlight hit her face, and it glitched. Just slightly, like a dropped frame in a film. She turned to the mirror across the room. Its surface rippled. From within it, a familiar voice whispered. You are not alone. They tried to end you too. Seraphine's reflection smiled faintly. But it wasn't malicious. It was protective. Calla whispered. Why do I feel like I remember everything and nothing? The mirror answered. Because your story hasn't been told yet. But it's already haunting the others. The window cracked slightly, and the stars outside began rearranging again. The stars had rearranged themselves into a spiral above Hogwarts. Not constellations. Not runes. Something else. A symbol Hermione had never seen before, shifting like a paragraph in revision. She stood just outside Calla's room the next morning, clutching her wand and a journal filled with half-formed theories. Harry and Ron flanked her, both on edge. Inside, Calla slept, bathed in flickering silver light. The mirror across the room no longer showed her reflection, only a slowly turning page. Do we wake her? Harry asked. We can't, Hermione replied. She's dreaming. And I think the dream is writing her. Ron raised an eyebrow. Writing her? She's not just caught between genres. She's the start of a new one. McGonagall summoned them to her office at noon. The wards around Calla's tower had begun bending, flexing rather than failing. Unnatural. That alone meant trouble. She's attracting narrative weight, McGonagall said grimly. The kind of pull that forms plot lines around a central figure, whether or not she wants them. She doesn't, Hermione said firmly. She's terrified. The headmistress folded her hands. Then we must stabilize her before the castle reacts. If not, suddenly the room lurched. A blast of wind shot through the walls, even though every window was shut. The torches flared, and for a split second, all four of them saw it. Hogwarts as a blank page. Stone walls scribbled out. Hallways lined with flickering cursor marks. And hanging above the school, an enormous open book, its pages turning themselves faster and faster. Then snap, it was gone. But the message remained. The story wants to begin again, Hermione whispered. The corridors didn't twist like before. This was subtler. Footsteps echoed too long. Portraits changed positions. Students started quoting things they hadn't read. One Hufflepuff recited a monologue from a non-existent play while brushing his teeth. A Slytherin girl wrote an essay that vanished the moment she stopped writing, only to reappear on someone else's parchment in a different form. Genre reversion. The echo of narrative trying to impose itself through Calla's subconscious. In the courtyard, a puddle became a portal to a war film. In the Transfiguration classroom, desks melted into puzzle pieces from a mystery novel. And near the room of requirement, An entire wall was rewritten in italics, like a dramatic diary entry. Luna approached them as the phenomena escalated. "She's not triggering this," she said. "She's being called." "By what?" Harry asked. Luna looked to the sky. "By something older than Hogwarts. Older than magic. The first idea. The one no one ever dared to write down." Hermione paled. The original story. That night, Calla woke up with ink-streaked palms. She hadn't been holding a quill. There were words scrawled on her arms in languages no one spoke anymore. Ancient magical dialects, archive runes, even one line written backward in floating symbols. Hermione examined them with every decoding spell she knew, and finally pieced it together. "It's a title," she said. Ron squinted. "For what?" Hermione's voice was tight. "For a book that hasn't been written. But it's coming." She read the translation aloud. "The story that unwrites the others." That night, the dream spread. Every student had the same vision. Calla standing in the center of an empty version of Hogwarts. No walls. No people. Only her, facing a door made of gold thread and lightning. And behind that door, a book with no name. They woke gasping. And for the first time, even Hogwarts itself shuddered. In her conjured tower, Calla opened her eyes to find Hermione sitting beside her. "I think I'm the problem," Calla whispered. "No," Hermione said gently. "You're the key." Calla hesitated. "To what?" Hermione looked at the mirror, which now showed a countdown instead of a reflection. 7 days. "I think," Hermione said, "you're the beginning of the end." It began with a ripple under the castle. A tremor not of stone, but of structure, of narrative fiber loosening. The portraits in the great hall had gone quiet. The staircases froze mid-shift. And perhaps most unnervingly, the Sorting Hat sang without being asked. A story new, a tale untold. Beneath your feet, the weave unfolds. Beware the book, beware the gate. To write too late is to seal your fate. McGonagall ordered a full-scale investigation. The 7th years called it the second unraveling. But this time, no floating remotes or glitched soundtracks accompanied the chaos. This was older. This was foundational. Hermione assembled the team that afternoon. Not just Harry and Ron, but Luna, Neville, Ginny, Padma, and even Draco Malfoy, who had grown increasingly quiet since Calla's arrival. "I see echoes around her," he said in the meeting room beneath the library. "Flickers of a version of me that never existed. I don't trust her." "She's not doing it," Hermione replied, holding up a map of Hogwarts with golden runes spiraling out from the astronomy tower. "The castle is reacting to her dreams. It thinks she's a trigger. Or worse, a rewrite. She's not a villain," Luna added. "She's a mirror. And something else is standing behind her reflection." Neville glanced at the growing spiral. "So what do we do?" "We find the door," Hermione said. "The one in all our dreams. The one she's seen 1,000 times in her sleep. We find it, and we open it before the book does." Calla, meanwhile, had stopped sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, the door drew closer. Every night, the countdown over the mirror ticked down by 1. She hadn't eaten in a day. Not because she wasn't hungry, but because she couldn't feel hunger anymore. She was becoming less solid. "Am I disappearing?" she asked Hermione, who had come to check on her again. Hermione shook her head. "You're becoming an idea." Calla looked down at her hands, now slightly translucent. "What happens when I turn the page?" Hermione didn't answer. They searched for 2 days. They found nothing, until Luna wandered into the forbidden section of the library, where the books whispered in languages never published. One tome opened on its own when she passed. It contained no title, no table of contents, only a simple diagram of a door. Golden thread and lightning. Exactly like the one from their dreams. At the bottom of the page, a riddle. Unwritten yet bound. Hidden in sound. When ink begins bleeding, the threshold starts breathing. Hermione translated it as a location, the Underarchive. A level beneath the Room of Requirement. One that Hogwarts never let anyone access, not even Dumbledore. A room where stories were buried. Cancelled. Abandoned. And maybe where the book that writes itself was waiting. They went in at midnight. 7 of them. Calla included. The Room of Requirement revealed a stairwell none of them had seen before, neither by map nor marauder's means. It was lined with blank books, each spine etched with shifting letters that refused to stay still. At the bottom was a single door. No lock, no handle, just a symbol glowing on its surface, one that looked suspiciously like Cala's eye color, whichever it was that day. She reached out. The door opened silently. The chamber beyond was vast, hollow, and humming. There was no ceiling, only a void filled with drifting parchment. No walls, just infinite space stitched together by magical lines. At its center sat the book. It floated several feet above a pedestal of stone. It was writing itself. Sentences appeared in real time across its open pages, even as they approached. And so the chosen ones entered, unaware that they were no longer real. Hermione flinched. "It's writing us. Right now." Draco backed up. "We shouldn't be here." But the book continued. One among them was not like the others. One was the door, the key, and the ending. Cala stepped forward. The book turned a page. Her story had been delayed long enough. Now the castle would remember the one it forgot to imagine. And magic would become something else. Suddenly, everything froze. The pages stopped moving. The quill at the book's center hovered midward. Then it looked at them. Not metaphorically. The quill turned like an eye opening. "Run," Hermione whispered. But Cala didn't move. Because the book spoke. Not aloud. Inside her mind. "You are the last blank page. Let me finish." The quill's mental voice echoed inside Cala's mind like 1,000 whispers tangled together. Simultaneous, relentless. "You are the last blank page. Let me finish." She staggered, clutching her temples, trying to push the voice away. But it seeped into her bones, reshaping her memories and thoughts with every pulse. The rest of the group stood frozen, watching helplessly as Cala's form shimmered between solidity and something else, something less tangible. Hermione's heart hammered. "Cala, fight it. You're more than just a page to be filled." Cala's lips moved, but no sound came out. Her eyes, each shifting color, focused on the book and then on Hermione. Finally, she whispered, "If I refuse, the book will erase me." Ron's voice cracked. "There has to be another way." Harry stepped forward, wand at the ready. "We don't know what this book's capable of." Luna placed a calming hand on Cala's shoulder. "You're not alone. Whatever happens, we face it together." Inside Cala's mind, the book unfurled like a scroll, images, stories, and possibilities flooding her consciousness. She saw Hogwarts as it might be, endlessly rewriting itself, a place where past, present, and future blurred beyond recognition. The school would become a place where stories began but never ended, a beautiful, terrifying chaos. And in that chaos, she would be the core, the key that kept it spinning. Freedom, the book promised. No boundaries. No endings. Only endless becoming. Cala hesitated. Outside, Hermione read aloud from an ancient text she had found in the forbidden section. A spell for narrative containment. "If we can trap the book's magic in a loop," Hermione said, "we can isolate it from Hogwarts. But it will take a sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" Ginny asked. Hermione swallowed hard. Cala might have to choose not to be written fully. To stay a fragment, a possibility, rather than a story. Ron's jaw dropped. "That's like not existing." Harry nodded solemnly. "But better than the whole school unraveling." Back in Cala's mindscape, the book's voice softened. "Choose. Be the story that ends or the story that never begins." Cala's form flickered. Her voice was barely audible. "I don't want to disappear. But if I stay," she continued, "I might erase everyone else." Hermione's voice echoed in her mind. "You're more than a blank page. You're the author of your own story." Suddenly, Cala's form brightened. A ripple shot through the chamber. The book began to tremble. Cala raised her hand. "I choose to be the story that never begins," she whispered. The book roared, words swirling violently as the quill spun faster and faster. Then, with a brilliant flash, Cala collapsed into shimmering particles of light. The group gasped, but the chamber around them shifted. The book's quill stilled. The floating pages stilled. The endless void condensed into a single glowing thread. From the thread, a delicate silver quill descended. Hermione caught it instinctively. It glowed faintly. A voice soft like Cala's whispered inside her mind. "I am here. In every possibility, waiting to be written." Outside, Hogwarts exhaled. The tremors ceased. The portraits resumed their places. The staircases moved normally. And somewhere deep inside the castle, a new thread began to weave itself, quietly, patiently, endlessly. Hermione looked at her friends. "We saved Hogwarts," she said softly. "But Calla?" Harry nodded. "She's still with us, in a way." Ron smiled faintly. "A story never started, but never gone." Luna grinned. "A perfect paradox." The school settled into peace. The book that wrote itself was now a memory, a whisper, a possibility. And Hogwarts? Hogwarts was home again. Peace returned to Hogwarts, but not silence. Though the book that writes itself was sealed, and Calla now lived only as a glimmer within possibility, the castle hadn't entirely healed. It was stable, yes. Safe again. But beneath the calm corridors and familiar stone walls, there was a hum. A whisper. A rhythm. A beat that no one could explain. Until the music started. It began in the middle of Transfiguration. Professor McGonagall paused mid-lecture when her chalk began writing to a tempo, dancing across the board in perfect four-count time. Elsewhere, the suits of armor tapped in rhythm as students passed. In the kitchens, cauldrons bubbled in harmonized tones. Peeves the poltergeist even rhymed his pranks. Then came the announcement. A mysterious letter appeared floating in midair, addressed to the survivors of the Gauntlet. "You've endured every story. But can you survive the final one? A challenge born not of genre, but memory. A story that's not finished with you." The bottom was signed simply. "The Curtain." Hermione's face went pale. "It's a theatrical device. A final act. A closing." Ron gulped. "You mean like, the last story?" "No," Luna said softly, appearing out of nowhere as usual. "The echo of the last story." That night, the great hall transformed. Without any professor involvement, it remade itself. Velvet curtains draped the enchanted ceiling, which now shimmered like a starry theater dome. Spotlights hovered. Rows of seats appeared facing a single empty stage. The Marauders' map went wild. Everywhere in Hogwarts began identifying as Scene 1, Scene 2, Interlude, or worse, climax not yet reached. Hermione traced the map carefully. "It's pulling everyone into a structure. A story shape." Harry frowned. "Like a final performance. And we've been cast without auditioning," she muttered. The next day, students received their roles. Magically assigned. Unchanging. Each student was given a mask they couldn't remove and a page of dialogue. They would be compelled to speak if prompted. It was part dream, part curse. Some resisted, only to find themselves rewound, glitched backward like an old tape, until they complied. Hermione, to no surprise, was cast as the scholar. Ron, the fool. Harry, the hero at a crossroads. Luna, of course, was the oracle. Neville was labeled the Lost King. And Draco, he was cast as the villain who isn't. Hermione found that last one particularly unsettling. That night, rehearsals began, but no one knew who was directing. Curtains moved on their own. Cues appeared midair. Music played without instruments. And somewhere deep in the castle, a voice hummed quietly. It wasn't Calla's. It was something else. A remnant. The story trying to finish itself. "This isn't like before," Hermione said as they met in the room of requirement. "The Gauntlet forced genres on us. This is trying to end something." Harry nodded. "It's like the story knows we survived and now wants closure." Ron sighed. "We can't get a break, can we?" But Luna looked thoughtful. "Maybe it's not punishment. Maybe the curtain is trying to give us something before the story folds." "Like what?" Hermione asked. "A choice," she replied. "To write the final act ourselves. Or let it be written for us." The next night was the dress rehearsal. Everyone, even the professors, fell under its spell. Snape monologued dramatically about destiny to an audience of confused fourth years. Hagrid narrated his tragic backstory in perfect iambic pentameter. Even McGonagall sang, a melancholic tune about order unraveling. And through it all, Hermione studied the pacing. She saw the patterns, the beats, the logic. This wasn't just theater. It was a memory extraction, a final sweep of everything left unresolved by the Gauntlet. A cleanup, a fade to black. At midnight, a second floating letter appeared. Final performance in 3 nights. Failure to appear will result in narrative decay. Not for the world. For you. Ron squinted at the note. How do we even stop a play that's writing itself? Hermione stared at the mask in her hands. We don't stop it, she said slowly. We rewrite the ending. 3 nights. That was all the time they had left before the final performance. The mysterious production scripted by the remnants of the Genre Gauntlet, guided by the curtain, and staged by a magic no one could fully trace. Every student in Hogwarts had been woven into the play. Some were thrilled, some afraid, most confused. But none could avoid the pull. Whenever they tried to walk away, the castle nudged them back. Paths looped. Doors vanished. Everything bent toward one inevitable destination, the grand finale. Except Hermione Granger wasn't about to let anyone take their final bow on someone else's terms. The room of requirement became their war room once again. Hermione had laid out enchanted diagrams of the castle, identifying key plot progression points and act zones that had begun appearing on the Marauders' map. They were moving, like the story itself was editing Hogwarts. The entire school is a stage, she muttered. Literally. Then we blow up the theater, Ron offered. Luna shook her head. Too dramatic. It's already self-aware. It would turn that into a second-act twist. Neville looked pale. The masks won't come off. I tried. Mine changed shape mid-sentence. They're identity stabilizers, Hermione explained. They keep the story coherent. Without them, the whole thing would collapse. Harry ran a hand through his hair. So we're trapped in a play that feeds on our roles, rewrites reality, and ends in 3 nights. What's the plan? Hermione pointed to a spell she'd been building, drawn from everything they'd learned in the Gauntlet, the Loom, even Calla's last appearance. It's called a narrative disruption loop. If we cast it during the final scene, we can fracture the curtain's script. Turn performance into improvisation. Give Hogwarts the chance to write its own ending. Draco, who had been mostly silent, finally spoke. And the cost? Hermione looked down. Our memories. Of everything that happened since the Gauntlet began. It landed like a blow. You mean we forget everything? Harry asked. Hermione nodded. Seraphine. Calla. The Loom. The Mirror. The unwritten book. All of it. Every anomaly. It's the only way to cut the final thread. Ron slumped into a chair. But we lived it. And we'll always carry the mark of it, Hermione said softly. Even if we don't remember why. Neville glanced at Luna, who simply smiled. Maybe forgetting isn't the end. It's just letting go. Over the next 2 days, they prepared. Hermione taught the group how to carry the disruption loop. Each person would memorize part of the spell, broken across 7 minds to prevent the curtain from detecting it early. They practiced in secret, behind shifting bookcases and under invisibility cloaks, timing each word to the beat of the curtain's invisible metronome. Students continued rehearsing around them, marching in and out of scenes, bound to roles they hadn't chosen but couldn't resist. Some had begun to forget why they were even in the story. Time and identity were blurring. On the eve of the final performance, Calla returned. Not fully, just a flicker. A glow at the edge of a hallway mirror. Hermione saw her first, her reflection watching silently, her outline made of glimmering thread. You're not part of this play, Hermione said. Calla smiled faintly. Not anymore. But I remembered one thing. Hermione stepped closer. What? Calla's voice echoed gently. The story only ends when you let it. Then she vanished. The final night arrived. The entire student body gathered in the transformed Great Hall, now unrecognizable. An enormous theater carved from starlight and shadow. The floating ceiling was gone, replaced with velvet black skies and silver chandeliers made from punctuation marks. A spotlight found Hermione instantly as she stepped onto the stage. The mask tried to lock into place. She resisted, just enough. Beside her, Harry's wand hand twitched. Ron tapped his foot to the spell's rhythm. Neville clutched his roll parchment tightly. Luna hummed the hidden spell under her breath, disguised as a lullaby. Draco stood behind a false curtain, prepared to interrupt the final line. The audience leaned forward. The scene began. Lines were spoken. Dramatic monologues unfolded. Love confessed. Secrets revealed. Betrayals dramatized. And then the moment arrived. The final soliloquy. The curtain's magic swelled, the entire great hall pulsing with theatrical power, rising toward a false conclusion. Hermione took center stage. The script hovered in front of her, demanding she read it. Instead, she dropped the parchment and spoke from memory. We are not roles. We are not masks. We are not endings pre-written by echoes. Harry joined in. We are the unwritten. Luna's voice was music. We are the noise between pages. Neville. We are the margin notes. Ron. We are the footnotes that mattered. Draco stepped into the light. We are not your final act. Then Hermione gave the signal. They chanted the disruption loop. 7 voices. 7 verses. One final choice. The spotlight flickered. The masks cracked. The theater began to collapse in on itself, curtains unraveling into ink, chandeliers falling like broken quills, seats dissolving into sand. The curtain itself screamed, not aloud but through story, through structure, through everything that tried to define them. And then silence. When the students awoke the next morning, they were back in the great hall. Whole, unaffected, laughing, stretching, eating breakfast like nothing had happened. The theater was gone. The drama forgotten. Except Hermione, Harry, Ron, Luna, Neville, Draco. They all had the same ache. A gap. A knowledge that something had happened. That they had saved the story, even if they could no longer remember how. And far beneath Hogwarts, deep in the quiet of the stone, the loom pulsed once. A single new thread spun itself quietly into the fabric of the school. We ended our story, and chose to forget. It started again with a name, one that no one had heard before. Except it felt familiar. Eris Vale, a 5th-year Ravenclaw, newly transferred. Except no records existed. Not at the Ministry, not at the Owl Registry, not even in Gringotts. And yet there she was, taking notes in history of magic, debating in defense against the dark arts, quietly correcting professors with unsettling precision. Hermione spotted her first during Charms Club. Eris had finished her spell work before Flitwick gave instructions. Impressive, Hermione said carefully. Eris smiled faintly. It's easier the second time. The second? I mean, Eris added quickly, once you understand the structure. Hermione's stomach twisted. She recognized that phrasing. It was how she used to talk. Back when the gauntlet distorted reality. Back before they chose to forget. That night, Hermione met with Harry and Ron in the old study room behind the tapestry corridor. Her voice was low. She knows something. Harry frowned. Like Calla? Ron shook his head. Calla never slipped up. This one talks like she remembers. Hermione paced. I ran a memory trace charm on myself last week. There are gaps. Deep ones. Missing connections. But they're clean, surgically removed. Because we chose to forget, Harry reminded her. We had to. Ron leaned in. What if she didn't? They were all silent. Eris appeared more often in the days that followed. She always seemed to know where to be. What to say. How to predict things before they happened. She told Luna about the moon's hidden verse in the Great Hall ceiling mural. Something that hadn't existed since the night of the final curtain. She reminded Neville of a dream he'd had, where he wore a crown made of pages. She slipped Draco a folded note during potions. It read, You were the villain who wasn't. I liked your ending. Draco nearly dropped his cauldron. Hermione finally confronted her in the library. Who are you? Eris looked up from a book that shouldn't have existed, The Mirror's Echo. You knew Calla, Hermione said. It wasn't a question. Eris nodded. I was her shadow, she replied calmly. The footnote no one wrote. Hermione's throat went dry. You were part of the story. I was supposed to be edited out. I wasn't. But we ended the gauntlet. We closed the book. Eris leaned forward. You closed your book. Mine never stopped writing. That night, Hermione tried the room of requirement. It didn't appear. Not as a classroom. Not as a sanctuary. Not as anything. So she climbed the astronomy tower instead. The stars above twinkled innocently, but not in the way they used to. Something had returned. A pressure. A rhythm under the sky. Eris was already there. I know what you want, she said without turning. Hermione walked closer. Answers. Eris tilted her head. You don't really want them. Not yet. If you did, the mirror would have opened again. Hermione hesitated. Why are you here, Eris? To finish it, she said simply. You may have disrupted the curtain's performance. But stories don't disappear. They wait. Hermione's voice trembled. Wait for what? Eris turned. Her eyes were silver thread and lightning. Sequels. Sequels. The word lingered in Hermione's ears long after Eris vanished from the astronomy tower, swallowed by a shimmer of wind and moonlight. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she pored through every magical theory, every record of post-narrative phenomena she could recall, none of which she could fully remember. The gaps in her mind were as sharp as glass. Clear enough to feel, but never enough to see through. By dawn, one thing was certain. Their final act had only closed a chapter. The series had already begun. At breakfast, the Hogwarts chatter was normal. Too normal. Students gossiped about Quidditch results, upcoming exams, and enchanted essays that graded themselves. No one remembered the Gauntlet, or Seraphine, or Calla, or the book that writes itself. Except for 7. Harry, Ron, Hermione, Luna, Neville, Draco, and Ginny. Each had begun to remember. Slowly. Neville caught himself finishing a spell that no class had taught him. Luna hummed tunes from unwritten musicals. Draco dreamed in screenplay format. Hermione had tracked it, each memory returning precisely one day after meeting Eris. Eris wasn't just a leftover thread. She was the stitch that pulled the past back together. So we're remembering because of her? Ron asked in their secret study room. That's not good, right? No, Hermione said grimly. It means the spell we cast, the disruption loop, is unraveling. Draco, flipping through an old copy of Ars Historia, muttered, typical. You think you end one ancient magic anomaly, and it spawns a trilogy. Or worse, Luna added cheerfully. A franchise. Harry stood. We need to talk to her. Properly. Hermione hesitated. If we do, we could remember everything, including what we sacrificed to seal the gauntlet. Ginny's eyes narrowed. Then maybe it's time we unseal it. They found Eris in the corridor between the Ancient Runes classroom and the East Wing. She was reading The Legend of the Fifth Voice, a banned folktale believed to erase itself when read aloud. I was wondering when you'd come, she said, not looking up. You're triggering memory bleed, Hermione said. Why? Eris shut the book. Because stories never truly end. They just pause. And the gauntlet was only book 1. Ron groaned. Why does magic have cliffhangers? Eris stood slowly. Because Hogwarts isn't just a school anymore. It's a narrative engine. The loom didn't disappear. It changed shape. Draco crossed his arms. Into what? Eris smiled faintly. A publisher. She led them through a corridor no one had seen before, lined with mirrors, but none of them reflected their faces. Instead, each pane showed an alternate Hogwarts. A noir-style Hogwarts under permanent night. A dystopian Hogwarts run by machines. A fairy-tale Hogwarts with towers made of spun sugar and dragon bones. Each genre you survived left an echo, Eris explained. Those echoes seeded alternate versions of this castle. The loom used them as backups. The book that writes itself needed them as fuel. And now they're growing. Harry turned slowly, watching one reflection flicker into a western. You mean? Yes, Eris said. The multi-genre Hogwarts exists. All of them. Parallel. Real. Waiting for stories. Neville swallowed. How many? Eris's smile faded. 24. Why 24? Hermione asked. Because you're in the 25th, Eris replied. The anchor. The one that all others loop around. So what happens to us now? Luna asked. Eris's voice turned quiet. Every sequel needs new stakes. Stronger magic. Bigger dangers. Ginny clenched her fists. No. We already sacrificed everything. Eris's eyes glittered. You delayed the ending. But you didn't stop it. And now, someone else is writing. Back in the Great Hall, cracks began to appear. Not in the stone. In narrative structure. A hallway led back to itself. The Great Hall hosted breakfast and dinner at once. A first-year boy began speaking in third person and couldn't stop. A history textbook recited its own audiobook out loud. The Genre Gauntlet had left its mark. But now, something else was editing it. Hermione stared at her reflection in her spoon, where her face blinked twice, once normally, and once in reverse. Someone's rewriting our story. That night, Eris summoned them one last time. She stood in front of the mirror of Erist. Only now it had cracked. Its surface shimmered like static, trying to display multiple versions of desire at once. Power, peace, truth, oblivion. Eris stepped aside. Look, one by one they did. Each saw themselves, not how they were, but how they might have been, had they not broken the curtain. Not stopped the book. Not chosen to forget. And in every version, a silver quill wrote their fate from above. The book wasn't dead. It had merely changed authors. The castle had stopped pretending. Hogwarts, the real one, the one rooted in stone and memory, had begun peeling back. Not breaking, revealing. Beneath every staircase was a footnote. Beneath every portrait, a citation. The suits of armor began speaking in exposition. And outside the windows there was no landscape, only pages. White space. Lines waiting to be filled. The school was being rewritten. Hermione, Harry, Ron, Luna, Neville, Ginny, and Draco stood in the room of requirement one final time. But now the room showed no walls. Only floating ink, drifting type, and 7 glowing books, one for each of them. And in the center, a desk. Empty. Waiting. Eris appeared without sound, her eyes the color of parchment edges and forgotten prologues. "It's begun," she said quietly. Harry stepped forward. "Who's doing it?" Eris paused. A being with no name. Not a person. Not a villain. Just authorship. Hermione's voice was low. "The force behind the gauntlet? The one that wrote the first story. The one that watched when you rewrote it. And now, it wants control back." Ginny scowled. "So we were just characters all along." Eris shook her head. "You were characters. Until you made a choice. Then you became something else." Draco touched his book, his hands trembled. "And now it wants to overwrite us." Eris looked at the desk in the center. "Unless you write first." The books hovered. Each student's floated to them. Blank inside, except for one sentence. "This is not how my story ends." Their hands moved instinctively. Wands became quills. Magic became ink. And with every word they wrote, Hogwarts stabilized. The Great Hall returned to a hall. The staircases reset. The sky came back, starry, imperfect, real. But it wasn't over. A voice rippled through the castle. Not in sound, but in thought. "You were never meant to decide. You were meant to perform." The pages around them burst into flame, and the books tried to shut. Eris stepped forward, arms raised. "Right." They did. Faster. Deeper. Pouring truth, memory, and soul into their books. Harry wrote of choice. Hermione of knowledge. Ron of courage. Luna of dreams. Neville of growth. Draco of redemption. Ginny of rebellion. Each word pushed the voice back. Each sentence rewrote the author's control. Then came the final blow. Hermione closed her book and threw it into the center of the room. It burst into light, and from that light Calla emerged. Not as a girl, as a reflection. A form made of every genre, every echo, every possibility that Hogwarts had endured. She looked at them all and smiled. "You gave me the end I was never allowed," she said. Harry stepped forward. "Can you stop the author?" She shook her head. "Only you can. But I can give you the pen." The desk filled with light. A single quill appeared. Silver thread and lightning. Hermione took it. Her hands were steady. "Time to finish our story," she said. And with one stroke she wrote. "We are not written. We are writing." The quill vanished. The books closed. And Hogwarts breathed. For the first time in months, it was just a school again. No gauntlet. No stages. No rewrites. Only students. Living their own stories. A week later, everything felt normal. Too normal. But the 7 remembered everything. And in the library, hidden behind the history section, they kept the 7 books safe. Not as weapons, but as proof. That once they took control of their story. And ended it on their own terms. The end.